New York, Harlem. A young boxer publicly beats up Bumpy's men and even strikes Johnson himself. But the brutal response from Bumpy's guards quickly shows him why Harlem isn't ruled by fists and emotions, but by a cold, calculating mind. Subscribe now if you're interested in legends about crime bosses and their lives. Get comfortable. We're about to begin. 1946. Harlem had different kinds of noise. Friday noise, money noise, whiskey noise, and the kind that came before somebody made a mistake. The Blue Lantern Social Club on West 139th Street had all four. Music pushed through the walls, glasses touched, cards slapped green felt, men argued over baseball, women laughed near the bar, and cigarette smoke hung beneath the ceiling like something that had paid admission. Nobody was watching the front door. Nobody needed to. The trouble was already inside. His name was Lenny Briggs, 25 years old, 6'3", 212 pounds, shoulders built for a heavyweight division that had forgotten his name. He stood beside the bar with his jacket off, white shirt, sleeves rolled, hands empty. In Harlem, empty hands could still be weapons, especially his. 1948. 3 years earlier, people had paid to watch those hands. Not much. $5, sometimes $10. Enough to fill small boxing halls in Manhattan and the Bronx. Enough for newspaper men to begin spelling Lenny Briggs correctly. He had been 22 then, 8 professional fights, 7 victories, 5 by knockout. No championship, no fortune, just possibility. Possibility is the cheapest thing in New York until somebody tries to take it away. Then it becomes priceless. Tonight, nobody at the Blue Lantern was talking about Lenny Briggs the boxer. They were looking at Lenny Briggs the doorman. The man who checked coats, moved drunks, carried beer crates, and stood outside when somebody needed convincing. 3 years can turn applause into instructions. Lenny had learned that. He had not learned to forgive it. 1951. The older man at the end of the bar was named Calvin Morrow. 58, gray at the temples, thin mustache, dark brown suit that had been expensive before the elbows began shining. Calvin had worked around Bumpy Johnson for 16 years. Not as muscle, not as a collector. Calvin remembered names, doors, introductions. Which man could be trusted with $500? Which man could not be trusted with 5 minutes? That made him useful. Useful men rarely look dangerous, danger advertises. Usefulness keeps receipts. Calvin had entered the Blue Lantern 20 minutes earlier to speak with the owner about a disagreement involving 2 card tables and a weekly payment. Routine. He had finished his drink. He was preparing to leave. Then Lenny noticed him. The young man's expression changed. Not quickly. Recognition is sometimes slower than anger, but it lasts longer. 1953. Lenny stepped away from the bar. Calvin saw him coming. He didn't recognize him. That mattered. "You Morrow?" Calvin turned. "Who wants to know?" "Lenny Briggs." Nothing. No reaction. Lenny waited. Still nothing. That hurt more than recognition would have. "You don't know me." Calvin studied his face. "Should I?" The music continued behind them. A trumpet. A piano. Someone laughing too loudly. Lenny moved closer. "You know men who know me." Calvin put down his glass. New York has a particular kind of sentence. It begins with somebody explaining who they know. It usually ends with somebody learning it wasn't enough. Calvin looked at the young man's shoulders, then his hands. Old men survive by noticing what young men want noticed. "You've got something to say," Calvin said. "Say it." 1955. Lenny smiled. There was no humor in it. 3 years ago, Calvin waited. Does that help? No. 1953. Calvin's eyes changed slightly. Lenny saw it. That was enough. There. Lenny pointed at him. There it is. Calvin didn't move. I don't know what you're talking about. Bullshit. The word cut through the music. Two men near the card tables looked over. The bartender stopped polishing a glass. Calvin lowered his voice. You want to shout, find a church? I already tried churches. Lenny stepped closer. They don't give years back. Calvin's jaw tightened, not fear. Calculation. That made Lenny angrier. He had spent 3 years imagining men like Calvin remembering everything. Apparently pain could belong completely to one side. That was another insult nobody tells you about. The man who loses remembers the date. The man who wins remembers dinner. 1957. Calvin reached for his hat. We're done. Lenny caught his wrist. The room changed. Not stopped, changed. The piano continued, but fewer people listened. Calvin looked down at the hand around his wrist, then up. Take your hand off me. Ask me why. Why what? Why I know 1953. Calvin pulled once. Lenny didn't release him. A 25-year-old heavyweight and a 58-year-old man do not negotiate strength. Strength has already counted the votes. Calvin's voice stayed level. You're making a mistake. Lenny leaned closer. No. His grip tightened. I'm collecting one. The bartender moved round the counter. Lenny glanced at him, one glance. The bartender stopped. There are men who need a pistol to control a room. There are men who only need everybody to understand what their shoulders can do. Lenny had spent years building that language. Tonight, he intended to speak it. 1959. Calvin's free hand came up, not a punch. A warning. Lenny moved first. His right hand struck Calvin beneath the ribs. Short, compact. A boxer's punch, Calvin folded. The room gasped. Lenny released his wrist and caught him by the jacket before he hit the floor. Then another punch, left to the body. Calvin's knees weakened. A chair fell backward. The piano stopped. Now the Blue Lantern had only one sound. Breathing. 40 people. One room, nobody volunteering. Calvin tried to straighten. Lenny hit him across the mouth. Hard enough to turn his head, not hard enough to put him unconscious. That distinction was deliberate. Lenny did not want Calvin asleep. He wanted him listening. Anger without control is a fire. Anger with control is a furnace. One destroys whatever is near. The other chooses what melts. 2001, Calvin fell against a table. Cards scattered. A glass broke. Lenny followed. Two men near the wall took one step forward. Don't. Lenny didn't shout. He didn't have to. They stopped. Calvin wiped blood from his lip. You know who you're touching? Lenny laughed once. Finally, there it was. The sentence he had waited 3 years to hear. I know exactly who I'm touching. He grabbed Calvin by the collar. That's why I'm touching you. Calvin swung, oldie slow, brave. Lenny slipped the punch and drove his fist into Calvin's stomach. Calvin collapsed to one knee. Lenny stood over him. The room watched. Reputation is strange currency. It can protect a man for 20 years. Then somebody spends it in 30 seconds. Calvin looked up, not pleading. That irritated Lenny too. He wanted fear. Instead, he found patience. 2003. Tell him, Lenny said. Calvin breathed through his nose. Tell who? Now Lenny raised his voice. Bumpy. The name traveled farther than the punch had. Someone near the door left immediately. Someone else reached for a telephone. Lenny noticed both. He allowed both. That was the point. Tell Bumpy Johnson Lenny Briggs is done waiting. Calvin pushed himself against the table. Blood marked his lower lip. You don't know what you're asking for. I ain't asking. Lenny turned toward the room. He wanted witnesses now. Every eye, every ear. Tell the old king if he wants an answer, he can come get it himself. Nobody moved. Lenny looked back at Calvin. Tell him to come outside. Calvin stared at him. For the first time, something besides pain entered his expression. Recognition, not of Lenny, of the situation. Some insults are directed at a man, others are directed at the chair he sits in. This one was aimed at the chair. 20:05. Calvin stood slowly. Lenny led him. That confused the room. A beating usually ends with somebody on the floor. Lenny needed this one walking. Messages travel better on their own legs. Calvin adjusted his jacket. One button had torn loose. He looked at Lenny. Your father know what kind of fool you became? The question landed wrong. Lenny's face emptied. Not anger, something beneath it. Calvin saw the change. Too late. Lenny crossed the distance and struck him again. One right hand, Calvin went over the table. Bottles shook. A woman screamed. Lenny froze above him. His fists tightened, then stopped. That stop mattered. He could have continued. He didn't. He looked down at Calvin. Don't. One word. Calvin blinked through the pain. Don't ever talk about my father. The room had found the wound. It just didn't know how deep it went. 20:08. The club owner, Morris Van, finally stepped forward. 46 round glasses. A vest stretched across a stomach built by 20 years of late dinners. This is my place, Lenny. Lenny turned. Morris swallowed. Bravery often arrives after violence because arriving before it is expensive. You've made your point. No. Lenny picked up his jacket. I made the invitation. He looked toward the door. The point comes when he gets here. Morris lowered his voice. You should leave. Why? You know why. Lenny put on his jacket slowly. No, Morris. He buttoned it. I've been leaving for 3 years. Prison gates, cheap rooms, employment offices, boxing gyms where managers suddenly became busy. Hospitals that no longer needed visitors because the patient was already buried. 3 years was a long hallway. Tonight, Lenny had decided to stop walking down it. Tonight, he wanted somebody waiting at the other end. 2010. 2 blocks away, a telephone rang in the back room of a restaurant. The man who answered was Silas Reed. 39, broad forehead. Careful voice. One of Bumpy's men, but not one people wrote stories about. Stories prefer guns. Organizations prefer men who answer telephones correctly. Silas listened. He didn't interrupt. How bad? A pause. Conscious? Another pause. Who did it? He wrote the name on a paper napkin. Lenny Briggs. Silas looked at it. The name meant nothing. That was unusual. Men who publicly challenged Bumpy Johnson generally had histories attached. Debt, territory, family, an employer. Nobody woke up on Friday and accidentally declared war before dinner. Silas asked one final question. What exactly did he say? He listened, then hung up. Words matter, but exact words matter more, especially when someone wants them repeated. 2013 Bumpy was 6 blocks north, a small upstairs office. 1 desk, 2 chairs, a window open 3 inches against the August heat. No meeting, no ceremony. He was reading figures from a notebook when Silas entered. Bumpy didn't look up. Calvin got hit. The page stopped turning. Alive? Yes. Hospital? Not yet. Who? Lenny Briggs. Bumpy looked up now. Silas placed the napkin on the desk. Bumpy read the name once, no reaction. Then again. Something small changed behind his eyes. Silas noticed. He was paid to notice. You know him. Bumpy folded the napkin. Keep talking. Silas repeated what happened. The club, the beating, the witnesses, the challenge. Bumpy listened without interrupting. Power doesn't hurry information. Hurrying makes information feel important. Information should never know how important it is. 2015. Silas finished. Bumpy remained seated. He say why? No. Nothing? Kept saying 1953. That did it. Not visibly enough for most men. Enough for Silas. Bumpy closed the notebook. What else? He got angry when Calvin mentioned his father. Bumpy's fingers rested on the cover. Still, Silas waited. Calvin mentioned the father first. That's what Morris says. Bumpy looked toward the window. Traffic moved below. A horn. A bus. Someone calling from one sidewalk to another. 1953. 3 years was enough time for a young man to build a story. Long enough to polish it. Long enough to forget which pieces he had never actually seen. Memory does not need truth. It needs repetition. Bumpy stood. Where's Calvin? Still there. Get a doctor to him. Silas nodded. And Briggs? Waiting. Bumpy reached for his jacket. Good. 2018. At the Blue Lantern, Lenny sat alone at a table. Nobody had asked him to leave again. Nobody had offered him another drink either. Distance is how civilians vote. Calvin had been moved into Morris's office. A wet towel, ice. 2 men checking whether his ribs were broken. Lenny could hear them through the wall. He felt no satisfaction. That bothered him. For 3 years he had imagined something like this. Not Calvin specifically. Someone. A face connected to the machine that had closed around his life. He had imagined the first punch would feel like recovering property. It didn't. His knuckles hurt. That was all. Lenny looked at them. Big hands, clean nails, old scars across 2 knuckles. His father used to call them his ticket. Lenny had believed him. Fathers are allowed to exaggerate. Sons usually learn that too late. 2020. A young waiter approached. You want water? Lenny looked up. The waiter couldn't have been older than 19. Scared, trying not to show it. Yeah. The waiter brought a glass. Lenny drank half. You box? The question surprised him. Used to. I seen your name. Lenny stared. Where? My brother had a newspaper clipping. You fought Eddie Tolan at St. Nicholas. Lenny remembered. 3rd round. Left hook. Tolan had dropped like somebody unplugged him. That was a long time ago. 3 years ain't long. Lenny looked at the glass. Depends where you spend them. He didn't say it. The waiter nodded toward the door. You really waiting for Johnson? Yeah. Why? Lenny lifted his eyes. Because sometimes the man who sends the bill should see what it cost. The waiter left. The room became distant again. 2023. Bumpy put on his jacket. Silas watched. You want 4 men? 2. Briggs is big. So is a building. Bumpy adjusted one cuff. Buildings still have doors. Silas understood. This wasn't about size. Who? Arthur Knox, Benny Hale. Silas nodded. Both were downstairs. Arthur was 36, heavy through the chest. Patient. Benny was 32. Long arms, former dock worker. Neither talked while working. That was why Bumpy preferred them. Noise is usually compensation. Competence doesn't need an audience. Silas hesitated. He called you out in front of 40 people. I heard you. People will hear if you go. People already heard. Bumpy picked up his hat. That was the arithmetic. A public challenge creates a public debt. Ignore it, and the debt earns interest. Answer it badly, and everyone becomes a banker. Bumpy walked toward the door. 2026 Lenny's past had begun with a bell. Not a gun, not handcuffs. A bell, a neighborhood gym in 1948. Leather bag sweat, rosin. A trainer named Nate Cullen holding a stopwatch. Lenny had been 17, too tall, too angry, too willing to swing. Nate taught him the first rule. Hands come back. Lenny didn't understand. Nate slapped him every time his left stayed low. Hands come back. Again. Hands come back. Years later, Lenny understood boxing better. Everything good came back hands, breath, balance, everything except time. By 1953, promoters were beginning to call. Then police came instead. Witnesses, statements, names connected to Bumpy Johnson, a judge, a sentence. The bell stopped. Nobody had ever explained why Bumpy's shadow was standing inside that courtroom. Lenny had supplied the explanation himself. 2029. He had been guilty of things. Lenny never pretended otherwise. That was important. He had run with men who liked quick money. He had taken money that wasn't his. He had hit men outside a boxing ring. He had known they were Italian. He had even laughed about it. At 22, knowing a man's nationality felt like knowing his power. It wasn't. A flag tells you where somebody comes from. It doesn't tell you who answers his telephone. Lenny remembered Italian storefronts, back rooms, cash. Men who thought young black boys from Harlem would be afraid to cross them. Lenny hadn't been afraid. Fear had seemed like a weakness belonging to smaller men. Then the arrests came. His friends scattered. Statements appeared. And names from Bumpy's side helped put Lenny away. That was the part he remembered best. Because hatred likes clean lines, complicated facts make poor enemies. 2032 Bumpy descended the stairs. Arthur Knox was waiting near the car. Benny Hale beside him. Neither asked where they were going. Bumpy entered the rear seat. Arthur drove. Benny sat in front. Silas stayed behind. 3 men. 1 car, no convoy. A convoy tells the street you expect a war. Bumpy expected a conversation. The distinction could change. That was why Arthur and Benny were there. The car pulled into traffic. Harlem moved around them. Children on stoops, men outside barber shops, women carrying grocery bags, music from open windows. A city never stops because 2 men have unfinished business. That is one of its cruelties. Your worst day still has to wait at a red light. Bumpy looked through the window. Briggs still box? Arthur glanced in the mirror. Not that I've heard. Bumpy said nothing. 2035, Lenny had heard Bumpy Johnson's name in prison. Everybody had. Some men spoke it with admiration, some with hatred, most with caution. Lenny spoke it rarely. Hatred becomes weaker when shared too often. He kept his private. He remembered the first month inside. His father visiting, thinner than before. A cough he tried to hide. Lenny had pressed his hand to the glass. I'll fix this. His father had smiled. Fix yourself first. At the time, Lenny thought it was disappointment. Then the illness worsened. Letters became shorter. Visits stopped. Lenny asked for information. Information came slowly. Prison makes everything outside arrive late. By the time the final message reached him, there was nothing left to fix. His father was dead. Lenny sat in his bunk all night. Grief needs somewhere to go. By morning, it had found Bumpy Johnson. 2038, Morris entered the club from his office. Calvin's going to be all right. Lenny didn't answer. Morris stood across from him. You could still go. No, he's coming. Lenny looked up. Morris wished he hadn't said it. Something almost peaceful appeared on the young man's face. Not happiness, completion. Good. Morris pulled out the chair opposite him, but didn't sit. You think this ends the way you want? I don't know how it ends. Then why start it? Lenny leaned back. Because he got to live 3 years without knowing my name. Morris frowned. And? I lived every day knowing his. There it was. Not money, not territory, not ambition. A ledger. The most dangerous deaths are the ones only one person knows exist. Morris looked toward the window. You're 25. Yeah, that's young enough to walk away. Lenny shook his head. Not from this. 2041. The car stopped at a light. Bumpy watched a boy shadowbox on the sidewalk. Maybe 12. Thin arms, fast feet. His friend held up 2 palms as targets. Jab, jab, right. Miss, laughter. Bumpy watched until the light changed. Arthur? Yeah? What do you know about Briggs? Big kid, used to fight. How good? Arthur thought. Good enough people remembered. Bumpy looked forward. That's not what I asked. Arthur corrected himself. Very good. Benny turned slightly. He disappeared. Bumpy's eyes remained on the street. No. A pause. People disappear. He tapped one finger against his knee. Briggs was removed. Neither man asked what he meant. Men around Bumpy learned that questions had timing. A good question asked too early becomes a bad question. The blue lantern was 3 blocks away. Bumpy stopped tapping his finger. 2044 word had escaped the club. Word always escapes. Doors are useless against it. By now, men outside the blue lantern were pretending not to wait. A shoeshine boy remained 20 minutes past closing. 2 cab drivers had parked without passengers. A group outside a grocery store had stopped discussing the Yankees. Nobody knew exactly what had happened. That helped. Rumor improves violence. One man said Lenny had broken Calvin's jaw. Another said 3 ribs. A third said Calvin had pulled a knife. No knife existed. By midnight, it would become a pistol. By morning, perhaps 2. Facts walk. Rumors take taxis. Inside, Morris pulled the curtains halfway. Lenny noticed. Leave them. Morris looked at him. Why? I didn't hide when they took me. His voice hardened. I ain't hiding now. Morris opened the curtain again. Outside, more faces appeared. 2047 Calvin emerged from the back office. One man supported his elbow. His lip had swollen. His breathing was shallow. Lenny stood. Calvin waved away the helping hand. He walked toward Lenny alone. That earned something. Not forgiveness, respect. Sometimes they occupy neighboring rooms. You got your audience, Calvin said. Lenny glanced toward the windows. I didn't invite them. You didn't have to. Calvin stopped 6 feet away. You think Bumpy did something to you? I know. No. Calvin's voice was rough now. You know what happened to you. Lenny's eyes narrowed. Same thing. Calvin shook his head. Never is. Lenny took 1 step forward. Calvin didn't retreat. You got something to tell me? Calvin considered it. Then, not mine to tell. Lenny's jaw tightened. 3 years of questions. Another man with an answer refusing to open his mouth. Silence can look exactly like guilt. 2050. The sedan turned onto 139th Street. Arthur slowed. People noticed immediately. Not the car, the man in the back. Harlem had eyes trained by repetition. Bumpy didn't wave, didn't lower the window, didn't perform. A man who needs everybody to see his power usually doesn't have enough of it. Benny looked ahead. More people than I like. Bumpy followed his gaze. People aren't the problem. The kid? Maybe. Arthur parked half a block from the club. Benny reached for his door. Wait. Both men stopped. Bumpy looked at the blue lantern. Windows, entrance, alley, crowd. He counted without appearing to count. Control begins before movement. You don't enter a room when your feet cross the doorway. You enter when you understand what the doorway means. Bumpy put on his hat. Now. 3 doors opened. 2053 inside, somebody whispered. He's here. 2 words. The entire room rearranged itself. Men stood. Women moved away from the center. The bartender removed 3 glasses from the counter, although nobody had asked him to. Lenny remained where he was. His pulse accelerated. He hated that. For 3 years he had imagined Bumpy larger. Not physically, in the way nightmares make hallways longer. Now there was only a door. A man would walk through it. A man could be spoken to. A man could bleed. That thought steadied Lenny. He rolled his shoulders. Calvin saw it. "Don't." Lenny looked at him. "You already delivered my message." "I'm delivering another." Lenny smiled without warmth. "Save it." Outside, footsteps approached, not hurried. That bothered Lenny more than running would have. Men hurry toward emergencies, men walk toward appointments. 2056 Bumpy crossed the sidewalk. The crowd separated. Nobody instructed it. Nobody had to. Arthur walked on his right, Benny on his left. Neither reached inside his jacket, hands visible. Eyes moving, Bumpy stopped before the entrance. Morris appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Johnson." "Calvin?" "Inside, hurt but standing." Bumpy nodded. "And Briggs?" "Waiting." "Drinking?" "Water." Bumpy looked at Morris. That answer interested him for reasons Morris couldn't read. "Anybody armed?" "I don't think so." "Thinking is for tomorrow." Morris swallowed. "I didn't see a gun." "Better." Bumpy entered. The crowd outside leaned toward the windows. Harlem understood theater, but this wasn't theater yet. The curtain had risen. Nobody knew the ending. That included Lenny Briggs. That included everyone except perhaps the man walking through the door. And even Bumpy did not know everything. Not yet. 2059. The room opened around him. Bumpy saw Calvin first. Swollen mouth, damaged jacket, protecting his ribs, then Morris, then the overturned chair, broken glass. Finally, Lenny. The young man stood near the center, bigger than Bumpy remembered. That thought came and went. Lenny stared at him. For the first time all evening, he had nothing prepared. 3 years of imaginary conversations disappeared. Reality has that habit. It arrives and fires the scriptwriter. Bumpy removed his hat, handed it to Benny. He looked once around the club, then back at Lenny. No anger. That made Lenny's breathing heavier. He had wanted anger. Anger would make them equal for a moment. Instead, Bumpy looked at him like a man examining an invoice, not rejecting it, checking the arithmetic. Lenny stepped forward. "So you came?" Bumpy answered. "You asked." 2102, nobody sat. Nobody ordered the music restarted. Calvin moved toward Bumpy. Bumpy lifted one hand. Calvin stopped. "Later." One word, Calvin understood. This was no longer his conversation. Lenny walked another step. Arthur shifted. Bumpy didn't look at him. Arthur stopped. Lenny noticed. That small gesture irritated him. Even now, even standing within reach. Bumpy controlled who moved. "Remember me?" Lenny asked. Bumpy studied him. "Yes." The answer struck harder than Lenny expected. He had prepared himself for denial, for confusion, for the insult of being forgotten. Instead, "Yes." Lenny's mouth tightened. "Then you know why I'm here." "No." "You know what happened." "I know several things that happened." Lenny stepped closer. "Don't talk to me like that." Bumpy's expression remained unchanged. "Then ask a better question." The room seemed to shrink. 2105. Lenny's hands closed. Not fists yet. Almost. 3 years. Bumpy waited. "You took 3 years." No response. "I had fights lined up." Still nothing. "People coming to watch me." Bumpy's eyes stayed on his face. "You had your people talk." Lenny's voice rose. "Statements, witnesses, men tied to you." Arthur looked at Bumpy. Bumpy gave nothing back, Lenny continued. "They put me inside." A pause. "My father was sick." The anger changed shape. This wasn't performance anymore. He was getting worse while I was sitting behind a wall. Bumpy's face remained still. Lenny hated him for that stillness. I could have fought. His voice cracked once. He corrected it immediately. I could have made money. The club disappeared for him. There was only Bumpy now. And he died. Silence moved closer. He died while I was in there. 2108. Bumpy said nothing. That was the worst answer available. Lenny moved closer. 4 feet. Arthur watched his shoulders. Benny watched his hands. Bumpy watched his eyes. Different men measured different weapons. You know what they told me? Lenny asked. Bumpy waited. They told me there wasn't enough money. His jaw tightened. Doctors cost money. No response. Medicine costs money. Still nothing. But I had hands. Lenny raised them slightly. These were supposed to pay for it. Bumpy looked at the hands, scarred, heavy, still quick. Lenny saw him looking. You took them from me. Bumpy finally spoke. No. One word quiet. Lenny's face hardened. No? Bumpy held his gaze. I didn't take your hands. Lenny stepped forward again. No. His voice dropped. You just made sure I couldn't use them. 2111. Outside, somebody pressed closer to the glass. Inside, nobody noticed. Lenny's anger had become gravity. Everything leaned toward it. My father died thinking I failed him. Bumpy's eyes changed. Small, almost invisible. Lenny caught it. You hear me now? I hear you. You destroyed my career. Bumpy said nothing. You put me in a cage. Nothing. You left him alone. Nothing. Each silence made Lenny louder. Silence does that to guilty men. It also does it to innocent ones. The difference usually arrives too late. Lenny pointed at Bumpy's chest. I buried my father after they finally let me out. Bumpy looked at the finger, then at Lenny. Arthur took half a step. Bumpy stopped him with his eyes. Lenny breathed hard. 3 years had reached the surface. There would be no putting them back. Not tonight. 2114. You want to know what prison taught me? Lenny asked. Bumpy answered. No. That surprised him. Lenny blinked. Bumpy continued. You came here because you want to tell me. The words were soft. Soft can insult louder than shouting. Lenny's face tightened. Yeah. He nodded. Yeah, I do. Bumpy waited. So Lenny told him. About the cell. About letters. About the last visit from his father. About hearing that the illness had worsened. About being unable to leave. About getting news of the death days after it happened. About coming home with no ranking, no manager, no money, and no father. He spoke faster as he went. Pain likes momentum. If it stops, it has to examine itself. Lenny had avoided that examination for 3 years. Tonight he had brought the evidence to Bumpy Johnson and demanded a verdict, 2117. When Lenny finished, his chest rose and fell. Bumpy remained still. Calvin watched from the wall. Morris stared at the floor. Arthur and Benny waited. Nobody knew which sentence would come next. Bumpy looked at Lenny for several seconds. Then, anything else? Lenny stared. What? Anything else you blame me for? The question was not sarcastic. That made it worse. Lenny stepped forward until less than 3 feet separated them. You think this is funny? No. You think because everybody in this room is scared of you I'm supposed to be? No. Lenny's nostrils flared. Then say something. Bumpy's voice remained level. You aren't finished. Lenny froze. Bumpy had understood something. Anger announces when it still has ammunition. Lenny's hands were shaking now, not from fear, from restraint, and restraint was losing. 2120. Lenny looked at Calvin, then Arthur, then Benny, then back at Bumpy. "Your people took my life," Bumpy answered quietly. "Part of it." The room changed again. Lenny heard only admission. He didn't hear the distinction. Angry men rarely do. Finally, Lenny laughed once. "There it is." Bumpy didn't correct him. "Not yet. Timing is not numbers, it's alignment. Truth told too early sounds like defense. Truth told after a man empties himself can become something else." Lenny moved within arm's reach. Arthur's weight shifted. Benny's right hand opened. Bumpy saw both. He gave neither permission. Lenny noticed that too. "You ain't gonna hide behind them?" Bumpy looked at him. "I came through the door." Lenny swallowed. The sentence removed one more excuse. No distance, no messenger, no telephone. The man he hated was standing directly in front of him. 21:23. The blue lantern held its breath. Lenny had imagined this moment hundreds of times. Sometimes he shouted, sometimes Bumpy apologized, sometimes Lenny walked away, sometimes he didn't. None of those versions had included this much quiet. Quiet makes a man hear himself. That can be dangerous. Lenny looked at Bumpy's face, older than his, calmer. No fear. That angered him most. "You should have come to me 3 years ago." Bumpy said nothing. "You should have looked me in the face." Nothing. "You should have told me why." Bumpy's eyes stayed on him. That word hung there. Why? The only useful word Lenny had spoken all night. But he didn't recognize it. Not yet. He raised one hand. Arthur moved. Bumpy's voice cut across the room. "Stay." Arthur stopped. Lenny stared. Bumpy had just ordered his own protection not to interfere. The room understood. So did Lenny. 21:26. Bumpy stood directly in front of him. No table. No chair. No man between them. Lenny's raised hand lowered slightly. For 1 second, uncertainty appeared. Then memory killed it. His father's cough. The prison glass. The letter. The funeral. The empty gym. 3 years. He looked at Bumpy. "You ruined my career." Bumpy didn't answer. "You hear me?" "Yes. My father died because I couldn't help him." Bumpy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Lenny saw it. "You hear that too?" "Yes." The answer was quiet, too quiet. Lenny stepped closer. His face was inches away now. "I want you to remember that." Bumpy held his gaze. "I remember more than you think." Lenny didn't understand. Not yet. Some sentences are doors. You only recognize them after you've walked through. Lenny's right hand began to rise. Open, not a fist. 21:29. Arthur saw it. Benny saw it. Calvin saw it. Bumpy saw it first. Nobody moved. The hand traveled across the small distance between them. Fast, heavy, open palm. The sound cracked through the blue lantern. Bumpy's head turned sharply. A woman near the bar covered her mouth. Someone outside the window stepped backward. Lenny's palm stung. Bumpy did not fall. Did not stumble. One shoe shifted half an inch. That was all. Then stillness. Bumpy slowly turned his face back toward Lenny. A red mark had begun forming across his cheek. Arthur was already moving. Bumpy raised one finger. Arthur stopped. Benny froze beside him. Lenny stared at what he had done. For the first time that night, anger gave him nothing to say. Bumpy looked directly into his eyes. No shouting, no threat, just a question. "You said everything?" 21:32. Lenny breathed hard. The room waited for him to understand the question. He didn't. "Yeah." Bumpy nodded once. "Good." He removed his jacket, folded it, handed it to Calvin. Calvin took it with both hands. Lenny looked from the jacket to Bumpy. Something had changed. Not rage. Procedure. That was worse. Bumpy adjusted one shirt cuff, then the other. You came into a room tied to my name. His voice remained quiet. You beat an older man because you wanted my attention. Lenny said nothing. You called me here. A pause. I came. Bumpy touched his cheek once, looked at his fingertips. Nothing there. Then back at Lenny. And you put your hand on me. Lenny raised his chin. I did. Bumpy nodded. I can't leave that unanswered. Arthur took one step forward. Benny took another. Now Bumpy did not stop them. 21:35, Lenny set his feet. A boxer's stance arrived naturally. Left foot forward, chin lowered, hands rising. For the first time all evening, something almost like the old Lenny Briggs returned. Bumpy saw it, so did Arthur. Benny moved left, Arthur right. Lenny smiled through his breathing. That's how it is? Bumpy answered. That's how you made it. Lenny's fists came up. Bumpy's eyes dropped to them. Those hands again. The hands Lenny believed had been stolen. The hands his father had once called a ticket. Bumpy looked at Arthur, then Benny. His voice was low enough that only the closest men heard it. Not the hands. Arthur's eyes flicked toward him. Benny gave the smallest nod. Lenny didn't understand. He had no time to. Arthur moved. The verse punch came toward Lenny's body. The young boxer turned. Benny closed the other side. The room broke backward. Chairs scraped. People moved. The old music never returned. 21:38. Outside, nobody could see clearly anymore. Bodies blocked the windows. Inside, Lenny slipped Arthur's first swing. Fast. Faster than a doorman should have been. He drove a short left into Arthur's chest. Arthur absorbed it. Benny caught Lenny across the ribs. Lenny turned. Another shot landed beneath his shoulder. He answered with a right. Benny ducked. For several seconds, the room saw what Lenny Briggs had once been. Balanced timing. Power, not a street fighter. A boxer. Rust doesn't erase steel. It only hides the shine. But boxing has rules. Two men do not. Arthur crowded him. Benny attacked the body. Lenny's back struck a table. He pushed away. Bumpy stood 10 feet from them, watching, not enjoying, measuring. And every time one of his men came near Lenny's fingers or wrist, Bumpy's eyes sharpened. Not the hands. The order remained. 21:41, Lenny landed once, clean. A right against Benny's jaw. Benny staggered. The crowd reacted. Arthur didn't. He drove his shoulder into Lenny and pushed him against the wall. Lenny tried to pivot. Arthur hit the body once, twice. Benny returned. A punch to the ribs. Another to the stomach. Lenny's breath disappeared. His hands stayed high. They were still protecting his face. Still working. Bumpy watched them. Lenny didn't know why. He only knew the two men were hurting everything around them. Chest, ribs, shoulders, thighs. Never fingers, never wrists, never elbows. That kind of precision doesn't happen by accident, but pain is poor at solving puzzles. Lenny swung again. Missed. Arthur caught him under the ribs. His knees dipped. Benny hit him across the mouth. Lenny fell against a chair. The chair broke beneath him. 21:44. Enough. Bumpy didn't raise his voice. Arthur stopped immediately. Benny stopped half a second later. Lenny remained on the floor, one knee bent, one hand against the boards, the other hanging beside him. Both intact. His lip bled. His left eye was beginning to swell. Every breath hurt. Bumpy walked toward him. Lenny tried to stand. Arthur moved. Bumpy stopped him. Let him. Lenny pushed himself upward. Halfway. His legs failed. He sat back against the broken chair. Bumpy looked down at him. Lenny expected mockery. There was none. Expected satisfaction. None. That somehow hurt more. Bumpy pulled an undamaged chair from the next table. Turned it around, sat. Close. Their eyes were nearly level now. Lenny wiped blood from his mouth. You done? Bumpy looked at him. No. A pause. You were. 2147. Lenny tried to laugh. His ribs rejected the idea. Bumpy rested his forearms against the back of the chair. Arthur and Benny stepped away. Calvin remained near the wall holding Bumpy's jacket. Morris looked toward the door. Bumpy noticed. Clear the room. Morris blinked. Everybody? Everybody who doesn't work here. People began moving before Morris repeated it. Nobody complained. Nobody asked for unfinished drinks. Curiosity is strong. Self-preservation usually wins. Lenny watched them leave. You don't want witnesses now? Bumpy looked at him. They witnessed what belonged to them. The answer puzzled Lenny. The last customer exited. Morris locked the door. Curtains closed. Now only 6 men remained. Bumpy, Lenny, Arthur, Benny, Calvin, Morris. The room that had been full minutes earlier suddenly felt larger. Empty rooms make truth echo. 2150. Bumpy looked at Lenny's hands. Move your fingers. Lenny stared at him. What? Move them. Lenny almost refused, then did it. Left hand, 5 fingers. Right, 5. Pain in the knuckle from Calvin. Nothing broken. Bumpy nodded. Lenny's confusion became anger again. What the hell do you care? Bumpy leaned back slightly. I don't. Lenny stared. Bumpy continued. Not for the reason you think. That sentence landed strangely. Lenny looked at Arthur. Then Benny. Now he understood one thing. They had avoided his hands deliberately. But not why. What's this? Bumpy didn't answer immediately. He looked toward Calvin. You all right? I'll live. Doctor anyway. Calvin nodded. Then Bumpy returned his attention to Lenny. 3 years sat between them, but for the first time Bumpy seemed prepared to open them. Not yet, almost 2153. Lenny spat blood into a napkin. You gonna lecture me? No. Then what? Bumpy studied him. Correct you. Lenny laughed despite his ribs. You think beating me makes you right? No. Then what does? Facts. The word was plain, almost boring. That gave it weight. Lenny shook his head. I know the facts. Bumpy's expression changed slightly. No. I was there. You were there for your part. I went to prison. Yes. Your people testified. Yes. My father got sick. Yes. He died. Bumpy paused. Then, yes. Each answer seemed to strengthen Lenny's case. He leaned forward despite the pain. So what exactly are you correcting? Bumpy looked at him for a long moment. The space between those facts? Lenny frowned. Bumpy stood. Not because the conversation was finished, because it was about to become larger. 2156. Bumpy walked toward the bar. Morris moved automatically. Whiskey? Water. Morris poured it. Bumpy drank once. Lenny watched from the floor. He hated the calm. The beating had happened. The slap had happened. Yet Bumpy behaved as if both were punctuation, not the sentence. 1953, Bumpy said. Lenny's body went still. Bumpy remained facing the bar. You remember who you were? Lenny answered immediately. Better than you. Bumpy turned. No. The word came without cruelty. That's the problem. Lenny tried to stand again. This time he made it onto the chair, bent forward, breathing carefully. I knew exactly who I was. Bumpy set down the glass. 22. So. Strong. Lenny stared. Fast. Silence. People cheering when you hit somebody. Lenny's eyes narrowed. Bumpy walked back toward him. And young enough to think applause was evidence. 2159, Lenny's face hardened. You weren't at my fights. Bumpy didn't answer that. Instead, you knew the men you robbed were Italian. The sentence changed the air. Calvin looked toward Bumpy. Arthur remained expressionless. Lenny stared. There it was. Something from 1953 that had not been spoken aloud tonight. Yeah, no denial. I knew. Bumpy nodded. You and your friends? Lenny's jaw tightened. We took some money. Several times. They had plenty. Bumpy almost smiled. Almost. That's how young men price consequences. Lenny shifted painfully in the chair. They weren't innocent. I didn't say they were. We beat some of them. I know. Lenny leaned back. So? Bumpy looked at him. That single word contained 3 missing years. So. He repeated it quietly, then pulled the chair closer again. That's where your story starts getting expensive. 2202. Lenny waited. Bumpy did not continue. Not immediately. He looked toward the clock behind the bar. 10:02. Time wasn't numbers. It was alignment. Some truths needed a man standing. Others needed him sitting. Some needed anger. Others needed the anger beaten quiet first. Lenny's had finally become quiet enough to listen. But listening was not understanding. Not yet. Bumpy picked up his jacket from Calvin, put it over the back of the chair. Lenny watched. You leaving? No. Then talk. Bumpy looked at him. You've been talking for 3 years. Lenny said nothing. My turn doesn't need to hurry. That silenced him. Outside, traffic continued. A horn sounded. Somebody laughed on the sidewalk. Harlem had already begun turning tonight into rumor. Inside the Blue Lantern, the rumor was about to meet something slower. Something colder memory. 2205. Bumpy sat again. Tell me their names. Lenny frowned. Whose? The boys with you in 53. Lenny hesitated. Why? Names. The old command entered Bumpy's voice. Lenny looked away. Curtis Vale, Ronnie Pike, Darnell Fitch. New names, old ghosts. Where are they? Lenny's expression changed. Curtis moved south. Ronnie? Don't know. Darnell? A pause. Dead. Bumpy nodded once. How? Street fight. When? 2 years ago. Bumpy looked at him. You sure? Lenny's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means you know less about where your friends went than you think. Lenny's anger returned. You trying to scare me? No. Then stop talking in circles. Bumpy leaned forward. I'm trying to find out how much truth you can afford at once. Lenny stared at him. For the first time that night, hatred had company. Uncertainty. 2208. Bumpy pointed toward Lenny's hands. You thought those made you important. Lenny didn't answer. You thought because you could hurt their men, they had to respect you. Silence. You thought because nobody stopped you the first time, nobody could stop you the second. Lenny's eyes lowered. There had been a second. And a third. Bumpy knew. Of course he knew. You knew they were Italians, Bumpy continued. But you didn't know what that meant. I knew enough. No. Bumpy's voice sharpened for the first time. If you knew enough, you would have stopped. Lenny looked up. Bumpy held his eyes. You weren't fighting neighborhood bookmakers. A pause. You were touching money connected to Lucky Luciano's people. The name settled heavily. Lenny had heard it then. Everyone had. But hearing a name and understanding its reach were different things. At 22, Lenny had confused the two. 2211. So what? Lenny said, but weaker now. Bumpy noticed. You tell me. They sent cops. Bumpy's expression became unreadable. That's what you think? Your people gave statements. That's true. They put me away. Also true. Lenny spread his hands despite the pain. Then what are we doing? Bumpy looked at these hands again. You're still arranging the facts wrong. Lenny shook his head. No, you don't get to... Bumpy cut him off. Did you ever ask why? I knew why. That's not what I asked. Lenny stopped. Bumpy leaned closer. Did you ever ask why men connected to me suddenly helped police put a young boxer in prison? Lenny opened his mouth. Nothing came. For 3 years he had asked who. He had asked how. He had asked what it cost him. Maybe he had never actually asked why. Hatred hates that question. Why creates doors. 22:14. Lenny looked toward the closed curtains. You wanted me gone. Why? Because I caused trouble. For Italians. Lenny stopped. Bumpy let the contradiction sit. If Lenny's victims were Italian, why would Bumpy Johnson care enough to destroy a promising young boxer? Lenny had an answer. He had always had one. Business. Bumpy nodded. Good word. You had arrangements. Everybody has arrangements. So I'm right. I didn't say that. Lenny clenched his jaw. Bumpy watched him struggle. A story repeated for 3 years becomes architecture. Remove one wall and the whole building feels threatened. Lenny had lived inside his explanation. Bumpy wasn't knocking it down, not yet. He was measuring the foundation. Your father knew you were robbing them? Bumpy asked. Lenny's eyes changed immediately. Leave him out of this. Bumpy didn't blink. Can't. The room went cold. 22:17. Lenny stood too quickly. Pain folded him. Arthur moved forward. Bumpy raised a hand. Lenny caught the table and remained standing. I told Calvin. His voice shook. Don't talk about my father. Bumpy stayed seated. Calvin didn't know what he was touching. And you do? Yes. One word. Lenny stared at him. Bumpy didn't explain. That was worse. What do you know? Bumpy looked at the clock again. Then at Lenny. Enough. Enough what? Enough to know your father understood 1953 better than you did. Lenny's face emptied. For a moment there was no anger, only confusion. Then anger rushed back to protect it. You're lying. Bumpy's voice stayed flat. I haven't started telling you anything yet. That sentence stopped the room. Lenny held the table. His fingers tightened around its edge. Intact fingers, protected fingers. He still did not understand why. 22:20. Bumpy stood. Get him cleaned up. Arthur nodded. Lenny stared. What? Bumpy reached for his hat. You wanted answers. Yeah, you'll get them. Now. No. Lenny took a painful step forward. You don't get to walk in here, have your men beat me, say my father's name and leave. Bumpy turned. I came because you called. Silence. I listened because you had something to say. Another pause. You hit me. Bumpy touched the mark on his cheek. I answered that. Lenny's breathing grew heavier. And the rest? Bumpy looked directly at him. The rest isn't about your anger. His eyes dropped briefly toward Lenny's hands. It's about why you're still alive to have it. Lenny froze. Arthur looked toward Bumpy. Calvian lowered his eyes. Bumpy put on his hat. The sentence remained behind him like smoke. 22:23. Lenny blocked the path to the door. Not aggressively, not quite. His body simply stood there. Bumpy stopped. Lenny's swollen lip moved. What did you say? Bumpy looked at him. You heard me. Why I'm still alive? Move. No. Arthur approached. Bumpy stopped him again. Lenny stared into Bumpy's face. For 3 years he had imagined finding guilt there. Now he found something worse. Knowledge. What happened in 1953? Bumpy didn't answer. Lenny's voice lowered. What aren't you telling me? Bumpy studied him. Then, tomorrow. Lenny shook his head. No. Tomorrow. Why? Bumpy looked around the damaged club. Broken chair. Blood. Calvin's swollen face. Lenny barely standing. Because tonight you're still trying to win. A pause. Tomorrow you might be ready to understand. Bumpy stepped forward. This time Lenny moved aside. Not from fear, from confusion. 2226. At the door, Bumpy stopped. He didn't turn immediately. Arthur. Yeah. Stay. Lenny looked up. Bumpy continued. Make sure he gets home. I don't need... Bumpy turned now. I wasn't asking you. Lenny fell silent. Bumpy looked toward Benny. Calvin gets checked tonight. Benny nodded. Then Bumpy's eyes returned to Lenny. You spent 3 years deciding what happened. Lenny said nothing. Spend one night considering that you might not know. He opened the door. Street noise entered. People outside straightened. Bumpy stepped onto the sidewalk. Lenny remained inside. His ribs hurt. His face hurt. His pride hurt most. But something else had begun hurting too. Certainty. Certainty is comfortable because it requires no investigation. Once cracked, it cuts from the inside. Lenny looked down at his hands. Neither was broken. That no longer felt accidental. 2229 Bumpy crossed toward the car. People watched. Nobody asked what happened. They looked at the red mark across his cheek. That would travel fast, faster than anything said inside. Bumpy knew it. He entered the car. Benny took the front seat. Arthur remained behind. The sedan pulled away. For half a block, nobody spoke. Then Benny looked into the mirror. You could have told him. Bumpy watched Harlem pass outside. No. He thinks you ruined him. I know. After tonight, maybe more. Bumpy nodded. Benny waited. Why tomorrow? Bumpy's gaze remained on the window. Because a man defending his hatred can't hear evidence. Benny looked forward again. The car crossed an intersection. Behind them, the blue lantern disappeared. Bumpy touched his cheek once, then said, and because his father deserves to be told correctly. Benny didn't ask another question. 2232. Inside the club, Arthur placed a wet towel on the table. Lenny ignored it. Use it. Lenny looked at him. You always do what he says? Usually keeps the evening shorter. Lenny took the towel, pressed it against his lip. What did he mean? Arthur pulled a chair upright. Ask him tomorrow. I'm asking you. Arthur looked at Lenny. You think everybody standing near a man knows everything he knows? Lenny said nothing. Arthur sat. That's how young men get themselves hurt. Lenny almost laughed. Little late for that. Arthur glanced at his hands. No. Lenny followed the glance. Again. The hands. What is it with my hands? Arthur's expression revealed nothing. Nothing. Bullshit. Arthur leaned back. Then keep wondering. Lenny stared at him. The answer was deliberate. That meant the question mattered. And suddenly Lenny had more questions than anger. He hated that feeling. 2235 Morris began cleaning broken glass. Nobody helped him. Club owners clean differently after violence. Slowly, each shard has a price. Lenny sat with the towel against his face. 1953. His father, Luciano. Statements prison. Alive. The words refused to stay in the order he had kept them. He remembered his father's last visit. The glass between them. His father thinner. Eyes tired but strangely calm. Lenny had said, they're saying Johnson's people talked. His father had looked down, just for a second. At the time, Lenny thought it was shame. Then his father had said, do your time. Not fight it, not appeal, not curse Bumpy, do your time. Lenny had hated him for that sentence too. Now, 3 years later, the memory changed temperature. Some memories don't change. The person standing inside them does. Lenny lowered the towel. Arthur. No answer. My father knew Bumpy? Arthur looked at him. Tomorrow. 2238. The sedan carried Bumpy east. Benny remained quiet. Bumpy preferred it. Silence wasn't absence, it was workspace. He looked at the passing storefronts. 3 years, a father, a son. A decision made when the son was too young to understand what was hunting him. Some debts should stay buried until the person they protected starts digging. Then silence becomes dangerous. Bumpy reached into his inside pocket, removed a small address book, turned several pages, stopped at an old entry. He looked at it. A name, a date, a telephone number that probably no longer worked. 1953. He closed the book. Benny saw it in the mirror but said nothing. Bumpy returned it to his pocket. Tomorrow required memory. Memory required precision, especially when the dead were involved. The dead cannot correct you. That makes accuracy a form of respect. 2241. Lenny finally stood without help. Pain traveled around his ribs. Arthur watched. "You walking?" "Yeah." "Good." Lenny picked up his jacket. One sleeve had torn. He put it on anyway. Morris unlocked the rear door to avoid the crowd outside. Lenny stopped before leaving. "Calvin?" The older man looked at him. Lenny hesitated. No apology came. Not yet. But neither did another threat. "What?" Calvin asked. Lenny looked at his swollen mouth, then away. "Nothing." He walked through the rear door. Arthur followed. The alley smelled of wet brick and garbage. Normal smells. Normal night. Nothing felt normal. Lenny looked at his hands beneath the alley light, flexed them once, twice. Perfect movement. Bumpy had ordered 2 men to beat him, and ordered them to preserve the very thing Lenny claimed Bumpy had destroyed. That contradiction followed him into the street. 2244. They walked west. Arthur kept 3 steps behind. Lenny noticed. "You're really taking me home?" "That's what he said. I can walk alone." "I know." "Then go." "No." Lenny stopped. Arthur stopped. Lenny turned. "You people always like this?" "Like what?" "Act like everything means something." Arthur considered the question. "Usually does." Lenny shook his head and continued. At the corner, 2 young men recognized him from the club. They stared. One whispered something. Lenny ignored them. 3 years ago, he would have enjoyed being watched. A boxer lives on attention. Tonight, attention felt cheap. He had slapped Bumpy Johnson in front of a room full of people. By morning, everyone would know. But none of them would know what Bumpy had said afterward. "It's about why you're still alive to have it." That sentence walked beside Lenny more closely than Arthur did. 2247. Bumpy's car stopped outside his building. Benny opened his door. Bumpy remained seated for a moment. "Find Nate Cullen." Benny turned. "The trainer?" "Yes." "He's still around?" "Find out." Benny nodded. "And pull what we have from 53. "Police?" "Everything." Benny hesitated. "You're showing Briggs?" Bumpy looked at him. "I don't know yet." "Then why get it?" Bumpy stepped out. "Because memory gets proud." He adjusted his jacket. "Paper doesn't." Benny nodded. Bumpy started toward the entrance, then stopped. "And Benny?" "Yeah?" "Nobody touches Briggs tonight." Benny understood immediately. Word of the slap would spread. So would volunteers eager to defend Bumpy's reputation. Even if somebody asks? Especially if somebody asks. Bumpy entered the building. Punishment had already been delivered. Anything after punishment was revenge. Bumpy had little use for men who confused the two. 2250. Lenny reached his building, 4 floors. Narrow stairs, paint peeling beside the mailboxes. Arthur stopped outside. "This you?" "Yeah." "Then we're done." Lenny opened the door. "Arthur." The other man looked back. "Why didn't you break my hands?" Arthur's face stayed neutral. Lenny continued. "I know how men beat people." Silence. You went everywhere except the hands. Arthur glanced down the street, then back. Maybe Bumpy likes symmetry. Lenny frowned. What the hell does that mean? Arthur almost smiled. Ask tomorrow. Then he walked away. Lenny stood in the doorway. He hated that word now. Tomorrow. Prison teaches a man to measure life by tomorrows. Release was tomorrow, a letter was tomorrow, a visit was tomorrow. Then his father had run out of them. Lenny climbed the stairs slowly. Each step hurt. At the second floor he stopped. Not from pain, from a memory. His father standing in this same stairwell, waiting. 2253. The memory was from early 1953, before the arrest. His father had been coughing then. Lenny had come home late with money, too much money. His father had looked at the bills. Fight purse? Lenny had lied. Yeah. His father knew. Fathers often know the lie before sons finish building it. Who'd you hit? Lenny had laughed. Nobody important. His father didn't laugh. Everybody belongs to somebody. Lenny remembered the sentence now. He hadn't remembered it in years, or perhaps he had refused to. These Italian guys. His father had gone still. Which Italian guys? Lenny had shrugged. Guys with money. His father had stepped closer. Leonard. That was when his father used the full name, when fear wanted authority. Which men? Lenny hadn't answered. He had walked upstairs. At 22, concern sounds like weakness. At 25, it can sound like prophecy. 2256. Lenny entered his apartment. One room, bed, table, sink. A pair of boxing gloves hanging from a nail. He stopped when he saw them. Old brown leather, cracked near the thumbs. He hadn't worn them in almost 2 years, couldn't throw them away either. Some objects become graves you can hang on walls. Lenny removed his jacket, then his shirt. Bruises were already forming across his ribs. Arthur and Benny had done their work well. He touched one, winced, then looked at his hands again. Nothing. He walked to the gloves, took one down. His father had bought the pair when Lenny turned 19. Used $8. Lenny remembered complaining about the smell. His father had said, "Win enough fights, buy your own." Lenny smiled despite himself. Then the smile disappeared. Bumpy knew something about that man. Something Lenny didn't. That fact was intolerable. 2259 across Harlem, Benny made 2 telephone calls. The first found nothing. The second found a man who remembered Nate Cullen. Still training. A pause. Sometimes. Where? Benny wrote an address. Then, "You remember Lenny Briggs?" The voice on the other end became quieter. "Everybody at that gym remembers Briggs." "Why?" "Because he should have been somebody." Benny looked at the paper. "What happened?" "You asking me?" "Yeah." "I thought you people knew." Benny's expression changed. "What does that mean?" The man hesitated, then laughed nervously. "Nothing." "Say it." "I just remember after he got arrested, Cullen kept saying the kid was lucky." Benny stopped writing. "Lucky?" "That's what he said." "Going to prison?" "Didn't make sense to me either." The line went quiet. Benny thanked him. Hung up. On the page, Nate Cullen. An address and one word beneath it. Lucky. 2302. Lenny sat on the edge of his bed. He opened the bottom drawer. Socks. Shirts. An envelope beneath them. He removed it. His father's letters. He had read them so often in prison that some lines lived permanently in his head. After release, he stopped. Hatred needed the letters to mean one thing. Tonight, Bumpy had made them unstable. Lenny opened the first. Not it. Second. Third. A letter dated 11 days before his father's final hospital stay. The handwriting was weaker. Lenny read slowly. Nothing about Bumpy. Nothing about Italians. Nothing about money. Then one line. Sometimes a closed door is the only thing keeping something worse outside. Lenny stared at it. He had always thought his father meant prison. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. Words from the dead are cruel that way. They cannot answer follow-up questions. Lenny read the line again and again. 2305. Bumpy stood at his apartment window. No whiskey, no music. The address book lay open on the table behind him. Benny had called. Nate Cullen had been found. That mattered, not tonight. Tomorrow, Bumpy touched his cheek. Still tender, he thought of Lenny's father. Not as a dying man earlier. Standing straight, hat in both hands, trying not to look afraid. Bumpy closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. There are promises that expire when a man dies. There are others that become heavier. The difficult part is knowing which kind you made. 3 years ago, Bumpy had made one. Tonight the sun had struck him because of it. Bumpy didn't resent the irony. Irony was just truth arriving from the wrong direction. He turned from the window. Tomorrow, Lenny Briggs would learn what his father had asked for, but not before he learned why. 2308, Lenny found another letter. Short. 4 paragraphs. His father asking whether he was eating, whether he was staying out of trouble, whether he had found a place to exercise. Ordinary things. Then the final paragraph. Don't spend your time deciding who to hate. Spend it becoming the man who can come home. Lenny lowered the page. He had ignored that advice completely. He had spent 3 years deciding. He had built the case, Bumpy's people testified. Prison followed, his career vanished. His father died. Therefore, Bumpy had destroyed everything. Clean, simple, useful. Tonight, Bumpy had introduced one new fact. His father knew more than Lenny thought. One new fact can ruin an entire verdict. Lenny put the letters on the table. His eyes moved to the boxing gloves, then his hands, then the letters again. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't certain who he hated. 2311. Bumpy opened a drawer. Inside were old papers arranged by year. 1951, 1952, 1953. He removed the third bundle. Not many pages. He found what he wanted. A name. Lenny Briggs. Another name beneath it. His father's. Bumpy read the page without expression, then folded it once, not to hide it, to remember where the important part began. He placed it inside his jacket pocket. Tomorrow. The word had become an appointment. Outside, Harlem was still awake. Somewhere, the story of a young boxer slapping Bumpy Johnson was already crossing bars, kitchens, sidewalks, and card rooms. By morning, everyone would know the slap. Almost nobody would know about the chair afterward. Nobody would know about the protected hands. And only one living man knew why Lenny Briggs had gone to prison in 1953. Bumpy switched off the lamp. Truth could wait until morning. It had already waited 3 years. 812. Morning makes violence look smaller. Night gives it shadows. Morning gives it receipts. By 8:12, the blue lantern had reopened its front door. Broken chair removed, glass swept, blood washed from the floor. The room looked normal enough for men who had not been there. That is how cities survive themselves. Lenny Briggs woke with pain in 3 places: ribs, jaw, pride. The ribs were easiest. He understood ribs. Pain there had shape. Pride was different. Pride asks questions while pretending it already knows the answers. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his hands. Still intact. That bothered him more than the bruises. Bumpy had ordered punishment, but not destruction. There was a difference. Lenny had spent the night trying to understand it. He failed. 8:15. On the table lay his father's letters. He had read all of them before sunrise, twice. Nothing named Bumpy, nothing named Luciano, nothing explained 1953. But several lines no longer meant what they used to. Do your time, come home, don't spend yourself on hate. Simple sentences, now suspicious. Memory is arrogant until new evidence enters the room. Then every old sentence becomes a witness. Lenny dressed slowly. White shirt, dark trousers, no tie. His left side hurt when he reached upward. He ignored it. On the wall, the boxing gloves remained hanging. He stopped before them. For 3 years, they had represented theft. A career removed, a future canceled. Last night, Bumpy's men had avoided those same hands. Deliberately. Lenny touched one glove, then let it go. He had an appointment with a man he had slapped. That was not common etiquette. 8:18 across town, Bumpy sat at a breakfast table. Coffee, toast untouched. 3 sheets of paper beside his plate. 1953 had been told from storage. Names, dates, locations, statements, the old machinery of consequence. Benny Hale stood near the window. Nate Cullen answered. Bumpy looked up. He'll come? Already on his way. Good. Benny glanced at the papers. You telling Briggs everything today? No. Benny frowned. Bumpy folded 1 sheet. He gets enough to understand the door. And the rest? When he understands what was outside it. Benny nodded slowly. Truth has sequence. That was one of Bumpy's rules. Give a man the ending first and he argues. Give him the path and sometimes he walks there himself. Bumpy looked at the time. Briggs moving? Arthur Knox had been watching from a distance. Benny answered. Left his place 8 minutes ago. 8:21 Lenny walked instead of taking a cab. Payne kept the pace honest. Every block reminded him of the body he had used as argument the night before. A man in a doorway recognized him. Briggs. Lenny kept walking. Another voice. Heard you slap Johnson. Lenny stopped, turned. The speaker smiled as if sharing a joke. You crazy. Lenny stared. The smile disappeared. News had traveled. Of course it had, but the story had already lost its second half. Nobody mentioned Calvin. Nobody mentioned the beating. Nobody mentioned Bumpy sitting beside him afterward. Rumor loves the loudest moment. Truth often happens after people stop watching. Lenny continued. At the next corner, a newsstand owner glanced at him twice. Lenny lowered his head. For the first time in years, he disliked being recognized. Attention used to feel like proof. Now it felt like debt. 8:24 Nate Cullen arrived before Lenny. 61. Lean, gray hair flattened back, old fighter's nose, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee. He looked at Bumpy once and sat. You found him, Bumpy answered. He found me. Nate understood immediately. How bad? Still walking. Nate shook his head. That's not what I meant. Bumpy said nothing. Nate stared at the table. 3 years. Yes. He still hates you? Yes. Nate gave a dry laugh. Then at least something survived prison. Bumpy looked at him. You knew he blamed me. I suspected. You never corrected him. Nate's face hardened. Wasn't my promise. That mattered. Bumpy leaned back. Promises divide responsibility strangely. 1 man makes them. 10 men suffer from them. Nate looked at the papers. You finally breaking it, Bumpy answered. Part of it. 8:27. Lenny reached 135th Street. He was 10 minutes early. He hated being early. Early meant waiting. Prison had ruined waiting. He entered a small restaurant beneath an apartment building. Arthur sat in a back booth. No coffee, no newspaper, just watching. Lenny stopped. You following me again? Arthur pointed upstairs. Second floor. Bumpy here? Yeah. Lenny looked toward the stairs, then back. What is this place? Neutral enough? Enough for what? Arthur shrugged. You'll find out. Lenny started upstairs. Arthur called after him. Briggs? Lenny turned. Arthur's eyes dropped toward his ribs. You throw a punch today. Make sure it's worth the walk home. Lenny almost smiled. Almost. That a threat? No. Arthur leaned back. Advice. Advice is different from threat only when the listener has choices. Lenny climbed the stairs. Each step pulled at yesterday's bruises. He kept going. 8:30. The room upstairs had once been an office, desk, window, 4 chairs, fan turning slowly. Bumpy stood near the window. Nate Cullen sat beside the desk. Lenny stopped when he saw him. For the first time since entering, pain disappeared from his face. Nate? Nate looked him over, long, disappointed, relieved, both. You look terrible. Lenny stared. What are you doing here? Same reason you are. I don't know why I'm here. Nate looked toward Bumpy. That's the problem. Lenny's expression tightened. Bumpy pointed to a chair. Sit. Lenny remained standing. My ribs hurt less standing. Then stand. The answer removed the contest. Lenny hated when Bumpy did that. He looked back at Nate. You knew him? Nate answered carefully. I knew of him. That's not what I asked. No. A pause. I knew enough. 8:33. Lenny laughed once. There was no humor. Everybody knew enough. Nate's jaw tightened. Watch yourself. Why? You think pain makes you the only man in the room with history? Lenny stepped closer. You trained me. Yeah. You saw what happened. I saw some of it. Then say it. Nate looked at Bumpy. Bumpy gave a small nod. Nate exhaled. In 1953, you were stupid. Lenny stared. That's your explanation? It's the first sentence. Nate stood. You were fast, strong, winning. He tapped Lenny's chest. And convinced that meant you understood men. Lenny looked down at the finger. Take your hand off me. Nate did. Still the same problem. Lenny's eyes hardened. Bumpy remained silent. He wanted this part to come from someone Lenny had once trusted. Truth lands differently when it arrives through familiar hands. 8:36. Nate walked toward the window. You remember the Fulton Gym? Of course. You remember Russo's boys coming by? Lenny frowned. Different Italians. To you. Lenny went still. Nate continued. That was the problem. At 22, Lenny saw categories: Italian, bookmaker, collector, store owner. He didn't see structure, didn't see one name connected to another, didn't understand that taking cash from 3 places could still mean robbing 1 machine. Bumpy finally spoke. You knew they were Italian? Lenny looked at him. Yeah. You didn't know who stood behind them. Lenny's jaw tightened. I knew enough to know they weren't saints. Bumpy nodded. Saints don't matter. A pause. Reach does. Nate looked at Lenny. Your hands were faster than your understanding. That line hurt, because it sounded like something his father would have said. 8:39, Lenny folded his arms carefully. So I robbed bad men. No denial. Good, we agree. Bumpy answered, we never disagreed. Then why were your people in court? Silence. The question was direct, finally useful. Nate looked toward Bumpy. Bumpy remained still. Lenny stepped closer. That's what I came for. Bumpy nodded. I know. Then answer. Not yet. Lenny's face hardened. You're doing it again. Doing what? Talking around it. Bumpy shook his head. No. He tapped the papers on the desk. I'm removing excuses. Lenny stared. What excuses? The ones you'll use when you hear the answer. That stopped him. Bumpy leaned forward. If you still believe you were an innocent fighter destroyed by somebody else's decision, you won't hear the rest correctly. Lenny's eyes narrowed. I never said innocent. Good, Bumpy nodded. Then we're moving. 8:42. Nate sat again. How many times? Lenny looked at him. What? You and those boys. Silence. How many robberies? Lenny glanced toward the floor. 3. Nate waited. Lenny corrected himself. 4. Bumpy said nothing. Nate continued. How many men did you put in the hospital? Lenny's jaw tightened. 2. 3. Lenny looked up sharply. Nate held his gaze. 3. Lenny remembered the third. A man outside a back room. He had fallen against a radiator. Blood everywhere. Lenny had forgotten his name. That fact bothered him now. Pain remembers itself perfectly. The pain you cause gets filed differently. Bumpy watched the recognition arrive. You thought nobody died, so nobody would care. Lenny answered quietly. I was 22. Bumpy nodded. 22 isn't a defense. No, but it explains the mathematics. 8:45, Lenny sat now. Not because ordered, because the room had grown heavier. Bumpy picked up one sheet. After the 4th robbery, word moved. Lenny's eyes followed the paper. To who? Bumpy looked at him. You already know the name. Lenny said nothing. Lucky Luciano's people. The name sat differently in daylight. At 22, it had been distant, almost mythical. A newspaper name, a name attached to men older than Lenny. Now it felt closer. Nate spoke. You didn't rob Luciano himself. Lenny gave a bitter laugh. Thanks. But the money climbed. Nate tapped the table. That's what you didn't understand. Money climbs, orders come down, simple structure. Lenny looked toward Bumpy. And you were part of that? Bumpy's eyes sharpened. Careful. Lenny stopped. Bumpy continued. Knowing a machine exists isn't the same as belonging to it. 8:48. Bumpy placed the sheet down. After the last robbery, men started asking where you slept. Lenny stared. Nate looked away. Where I slept? Yes. Why? Bumpy didn't answer immediately. Lenny stood again. What does that mean? Nate's voice came quieter. You know what it means. Lenny looked between them. The room felt smaller. No. Bumpy held his eyes. You still think the punishment started with police. Lenny said nothing. Bumpy tapped the table once. It didn't. Silence. The fan turned overhead. 3 blades, slow, mechanical. Lenny's mouth tightened. What happened before the police? Bumpy leaned back. Now the conversation had reached the edge, not the truth, the edge of it. People discussed you. Who? Men you couldn't have beaten. Lenny scoffed automatically, then stopped. The reflex sounded childish even to him. Bumpy noticed. That mattered. 8:51, Nate took over. You vanished from the gym for 2 days, Lenny remembered. Stayed with Curtis. Why? We thought cops were looking. Nate shook his head. That wasn't all. Lenny's eyes narrowed. What did you know? Nate rubbed one thumb over the paper cup. Enough to be afraid. You never told me. You wouldn't listen. Try me. Nate looked at him. Your father did. The room stopped. Lenny's face changed. Bumpy said nothing. This was Nate's sentence to deliver. Lenny's voice lowered. My father? Nate nodded. He came to the gym. When? 2 days before you were picked up. Lenny stood perfectly still. He was sick. Yes. He barely left the apartment. I know. Lenny looked at Bumpy, then back at Nate. What was he doing there? Nate answered. Looking for you. Lenny's breathing changed, and asking questions nobody wanted to answer. 8:54. Lenny's fingers tightened round the chair. What questions? Nate looked toward Bumpy. Bumpy gave nothing. Nate continued. Who you robbed? Who cared? Who was asking for you? Lenny swallowed. He knew? More than you. The sentence landed hard. Lenny shook his head. No. Yes. He would have told me. Nate stared at him. You mean the same way you told him where the money came from? That shut him down. Lenny looked away. Some accusations do not need volume. They need accuracy. Bumpy watched Lenny's face. The young boxer was beginning to lose the version of his father he had preserved, not the father himself. The version, the helpless sick man, the passive victim. Maybe he had moved through 1953 more actively than Lenny knew. That possibility frightened Lenny. Dead men are easier to mourn when they stay still. 8:57. Bumpy slid one paper across the table, not the important one, a police intake sheet. Lenny recognized his own name, date, charges, witness list, 2 names connected to Bumpy's side. He pointed. There, his voice sharpened. There it is. Bumpy nodded. Yes. You see? I've seen it for 3 years. Then explain it. Bumpy leaned forward. First tell me something. Lenny stared. What? When police grabbed you, did they find all 4 of you? No. Who? Me and Ronnie. Curtis? Gone. Darnell? Gone. Bumpy nodded. Did you ever wonder why? Lenny frowned. They ran. Maybe. Bumpy pushed another page forward. A date. A name. A hotel register. Lenny didn't understand. What is this? Proof Curtis was already out of state before your arrest. Lenny looked up. How? Bumpy answered. Someone warned him. 9 o'clock. Lenny stared at the page. Who? Bumpy didn't answer. What about Darnell? Nate shifted uncomfortably. Lenny noticed. What? Nate looked at Bumpy. Bumpy said, Tell him. Nate exhaled. Darnell wasn't gone. Lenny's eyes narrowed. Yes, he was. No. He disappeared. Exactly. The word entered slowly. Lenny looked from Nate to Bumpy. What are you saying? Bumpy's voice stayed level. Darnell Fitch was found 3 weeks later. Lenny stood. Where? New Jersey. Alive? Silence. That answered it. Lenny's chair scraped backward. No. Bumpy did not soften. No. Lenny shook his head. I heard street fight. You heard what people wanted repeated. Lenny stared. His face lost color. Rumor had protected him once. He just didn't know from what. 9:03. Darnell was killed because of the robberies? Bumpy did not answer directly. He was killed after men started looking for all of you. That's not the same thing. No. Bumpy respected the distinction. Lenny looked toward Nate. You knew? Not then. When? Later. And nobody told me? Nate's expression hardened. You were inside. So? So sometimes ignorance keeps a man from doing something stupid. Lenny laughed bitterly. Worked great. Nate accepted that. Bumpy watched Lenny absorb the death differently. Darnell had become something new. Not a friend lost to random violence. A possible consequence. Maybe even a warning. Lenny sat again. He no longer looked angry. He looked tired. Anger burns fast when facts begin taking oxygen. Bumpy let the silence sit. Understanding cannot be dragged. It has to arrive under its own weight. 9:06. Lenny looked at Bumpy. So they were coming for me? Bumpy held his gaze. Yes. That was the first direct answer. Lenny's throat moved. And my father knew. Another pause. Yes. The second answer changed more. Lenny stared at the papers. How? Bumpy didn't answer. Not yet. Nate did not move. Lenny rubbed one hand over his mouth. The hand was intact. Again he noticed. Again the contradiction. How much did he know? Bumpy replied. Enough to be afraid. Afraid of who? Men who had already stopped asking for repayment. Lenny looked up. What were they asking for? Bumpy's face changed. Not much. Enough. Lenny understood part of it, not all. His breathing slowed. The room no longer felt like an argument. It felt like testimony. And for the first time, Lenny was not sure which side he was on. 9:09. Nate stood. I should go. Lenny looked at him. No. Nate stopped. You don't get to leave now. Nate looked tired. Lenny, you knew my father was asking questions. Yes. You knew people were after me. Eventually, you knew Bumpy was involved. Nate looked toward Bumpy. Yes. Lenny's voice hardened. And you let me spend 3 years thinking. Nate cut him off. I let you spend 3 years alive. Silence. The sentence came too hard, too early. Bumpy's eyes moved toward Nate. Nate knew it. Too late. Lenny stood. What did you say? Nate closed his eyes for half a second. Bumpy stepped in. Sit down. Lenny ignored him. No. He looked at Nate. Say it again. Nate did not. The room had reached the door Bumpy wanted opened carefully. Nate had kicked it. 9:12. Bumpy's voice hardened. Sit. This time Lenny listened, not from obedience, from shock. He sat. Nate remained standing. Bumpy looked at him. Go. Nate nodded. Lenny watched him leave. At the door, Nate stopped, turned. You were good. Lenny stared. Nate continued. Better than good. A pause. That's why some people bothered saving anything. Then he left. The door closed. Lenny looked at Bumpy. What did he mean? Bumpy did not answer. Lenny leaned forward. What did he mean, alive? Silence. Did they want to kill me? Bumpy looked at him. Yes. No metaphor. No delay. The words struck harder than Arthur or Benny had. Lenny's eyes dropped. 22 years old. Fast hands, 4 robberies, 3 hospital beds, 1 dead friend, and men asking where he slept. The mathematics finally changed. 9:15. Lenny sat perfectly still. For once, stillness belonged to him. Was Darnell supposed to be me? Bumpy answered carefully. I don't know. Don't know. I don't lie to make a lesson cleaner. Lenny nodded faintly. That mattered. Bumpy continued. But by the time police picked you up, there were men who wanted you dead. Luciano. People connected upward. That's not an answer. It's the correct one. Lenny accepted it reluctantly. What about Ronnie? Alive. Where? Philadelphia, last I heard. Lenny looked toward the floor. 2 friends gone from Harlem. 1 dead, 1 vanished. Curtis warned. Lenny arrested. For 3 years he had treated arrest as the worst outcome. Now it looked different. Not good. Never good. But different. Perspective does not erase pain. It changes what the pain means. That can be worse. 9:18. Lenny raised his eyes. Then why your people? Bumpy knew what he meant. Why testify? Why help convict him? Why build the cage? Because police needed witnesses. That doesn't explain you. No. Then explain you. Bumpy stood, walked toward the window. Lenny followed him with his eyes. Outside, delivery trucks moved through Harlem. Normal morning, normal business. Inside, 3 years waited on one answer. Bumpy said, Your father came looking for help. Lenny's face changed immediately. Not full revelation, not yet, but close enough to hurt. From you? Bumpy turned. Yes. Lenny stood too. My father came to you? Yes. When? Before your arrest. Lenny stared. Why? Bumpy held his gaze. That's tomorrow's answer. Lenny's anger returned instantly. No. Bumpy remained calm. You have enough today. 9:21 Lenny slammed one palm against the desk. Papers moved. Bumpy did not. You don't get to keep doing this. Doing what? Giving me pieces. Bumpy looked at the hand on the desk, then at Lenny. Pieces are how truth becomes believable. I don't care. You will. My father came to you. Yes. He was dying. Yes. And you think I'm walking out of here without knowing why? Bumpy's voice lowered. You walked into yesterday believing I destroyed your life. A pause. Today you learned men wanted you dead before police touched you. Another. You learned Darnell didn't die the way you were told. Another. You learned your father knew more than you did. Bumpy stepped closer. If I give you the rest while you're still fighting those facts, you'll turn the truth into another accusation. Lenny stared. He hated the logic because he understood it. 9:24. Bumpy gathered the papers. Not all. One remained face down, Lenny noticed. What is that? Bumpy placed his hand over it. Tomorrow. Lenny almost laughed. Of course. Bumpy slid the other papers toward him. Take these. Lenny looked down. Why? Read them. I know what happened. Bumpy looked at him. No. The word had become familiar. You know what happened to you? Lenny said nothing. Bumpy continued. Read what happened around you. That distinction landed. Lenny collected the pages. His hands were steady now. Bumpy noticed. Good. The boxer was finally using them for something besides force. Lenny placed the papers inside his jacket. At the door, he stopped. Without turning. Did my father ask you to put me in prison? Bumpy did not answer. That silence was answer enough to keep Lenny awake another night. Not enough to settle anything. Exactly enough. 9:27. Lenny left. Arthur waited downstairs. He stood. Lenny shook his head. Don't. Arthur remained still. What? Don't follow me today. Arthur studied him. Order says I don't have to. Good. Lenny walked toward the door. Arthur called after him. You get your answer? Lenny stopped. Part of 1. Arthur nodded. That's usually how he does it. Lenny turned. You all talk like him. Arthur almost smiled. No. We just survive around him long enough to learn punctuation. Lenny stepped outside. Sunlight hit his face. The street looked exactly the same. That irritated him. He had just learned that one of his closest friends may have been murdered because of the same trouble that sent him to prison. His father had known, his trainer had known pieces, Bumpy had known more, and Harlem still sold newspapers, still opened stores, still crossed streets. Cities are rude that way. 9:30, Bumpy remained upstairs. Benny entered through the second door. How'd he take it? Badly. Good. Bumpy looked at him. Benny corrected himself. Means he heard it. Bumpy nodded. He turned over the face-down page. A handwritten note, old, folded twice. Benny had not seen it before. That from the father? Yes. What does it say? Bumpy folded it again. Enough. Benny accepted the limit. When are you giving it to him? Tomorrow. Benny looked toward the door Lenny had used. He'll come. Bumpy nodded. Yes. How do you know? Bumpy placed the note inside his jacket. Because hatred brought him yesterday. A pause. Now doubt will bring him back. Benny thought about that. Doubt is slower than hatred, but once it starts walking, it usually goes farther. 9:33. Lenny sat alone in a diner, coffee untouched, papers spread across the table. He read dates, statements, locations, names, a line about Darnell, a line about Curtis, a line about men asking for addresses. Nothing dramatic. That made it worse. Paper rarely shouts. It doesn't need to. The facts were colder than memory. Lenny traced one date with his finger, 2 days before his arrest, then another. A report that his father had visited the Fulton gym that same afternoon. Nate had told the truth. Lenny leaned back. His father had been sick, weak, still moving through Harlem trying to understand what his son had done. Lenny imagined him climbing stairs, coughing, asking questions, being afraid. A new kind of guilt entered the room, not guilt over prison, guilt over what had forced his father to move at all. 9:36. The waitress refilled a coffee. Lenny didn't notice. He kept reading. One statement described a man asking about the Briggs boy. Another referenced men from downtown. Another noted that one witness had suddenly refused to cooperate. The city around his arrest had been busier than he remembered. He had seen only police, court, bars, the visible things. But another story had been moving underneath. Quiet, organized, faster. Lenny closed his eyes. At 22, he thought power was the man who could knock somebody down. At 25, he was beginning to understand something uglier. Power was often the man who decided whether you were allowed to stand back up. He opened his eyes. His hands rested on the papers. Strong, unbroken. He remembered Bumpy's order. Not the hands. The sentence now felt less like mercy, more like evidence. 9:39, Bumpy left the building alone. Benny followed several steps back. Outside, a man approached, young, eager. "Mr. Johnson," Bumpy stopped. "Heard about last night." That was quick. The man smiled. "Want Briggs handled?" Bumpy's face went cold. "Handled how?" The smile disappeared. "I just meant—" "I know what you meant." The man swallowed. Bumpy stepped closer. "He paid for putting his hand on me." A pause. "That bill is closed." "Yes, sir. If you reopen it, the bill becomes yours." The man nodded quickly and left. Benny watched. Word really moved. Word always moves. Bumpy continued walking. Understanding doesn't. That was the problem. By noon, half of Harlem would know Lenny Briggs slapped Bumpy Johnson. Almost none would know why Bumpy had left his hands intact. By tomorrow, one man would. That was enough. 9:42, Lenny returned home. He did not remove his jacket. He went directly to the drawer. Letters, all of them. He spread them beside the papers, dates against dates, his father against the city. One letter had been written the same night Nate said his father visited the gym. Lenny opened it. The handwriting was uneven. "Son, there are times when a man must accept a smaller pain because the larger one has teeth." Lenny stared. He had read the line before. In prison, he thought his father meant the sentence. "Do the time. Don't fight guards. Don't make it worse." Now the sentence changed. Smaller pain, larger one, teeth. Lenny read it again, then looked at the police papers, then at the boxing gloves. His father had been warning him. Not about prison. Maybe about what prison had interrupted. Artanpas 9:45. He found another letter. 3 days after the arrest, shorter. "I know you're angry. Stay angry if you need to. Just stay alive long enough to outgrow it." Lenny stopped breathing for a moment. Alive. The same word Nate used. The same word Bumpy used. Coincidence is useful until it repeats. Then it becomes structure. Lenny sat. His ribs protested. He ignored them. For the first time, he imagined his arrest from his father's side. Police arrive, son taken. Career stopped, but son breathing. Maybe that had mattered more. Maybe the father had known what waited outside. Maybe he had accepted prison as the smaller pain. Lenny hated the thought, not because it sounded impossible, because it sounded increasingly possible. And if it was true, 3 years of hatred had been aimed at the wrong target. That possibility hurt worse than Arthur's fists. 9:48. The phone rang downstairs. His landlord shouted, "Briggs!" Lenny walked out, answered the hallway phone. "Yeah?" A man's voice, older, unfamiliar. "Leonard Briggs?" "Who's asking?" "Name's Samuel Keene." Lenny frowned. "Know my father?" A pause. "Briefly." Lenny's grip tightened. "From where?" Another pause. 1953. Lenny went still. "Who gave you this number?" "Bumpy Johnson." Lenny said nothing. Samuel continued. "He said you might want to hear what your father did that week." Lenny's throat tightened. "Tell me." "Not by telephone." "Why?" "Because some things sound like lies when you can't see the man saying them." The line clicked dead. Lenny stared at the receiver. Bumpy was not done. Worse, he was assembling witnesses, and every witness seemed to lead back to the same dead man. 9:51 Lenny returned upstairs. He stood in the middle of the room. Didn't sit, didn't move. His father's photograph rested beside the bed. Cheap frame, taken years earlier, before illness. His father standing straight in a work shirt. One hand on young Lenny's shoulder. Lenny picked it up. "You went to him." No answer. Of course, dead men cannot defend their choices. They leave that job to the living. Lenny placed the photograph down, then looked at the gloves again. For years he blamed prison for taking boxing away. That part remained true, but truth can be true and incomplete. A cage had taken 3 years. Maybe the cage had also given him the next 30. He hated the arithmetic, hated Bumpy for forcing him to calculate it. Most of all, he hated that his father may have calculated it first. 9:54 across Harlem, Bumpy met Samuel Keene outside a pharmacy. Samuel was 53, former numbers runner, now selling insurance. Men change jobs more easily than histories. "You sure about this?" Samuel asked. Bumpy nodded. "He needs your part." "Not all of it?" "Only what you saw." Samuel looked uncomfortable. "I saw enough." "Then say enough." Samuel lowered his voice. His father was scared. "I know. Scared men remember different." "Tell him what you remember." Samuel nodded. "What about the rest?" Bumpy looked toward the traffic. "Tomorrow." Samuel gave a small smile. "You still use time like a weapon." Bumpy looked back. "No." A pause. "Like a lock." Samuel understood. Open too early and the wrong thing gets through. Open too late and people break the door. Bumpy had waited 3 years. Now timing mattered more than ever, because the next truth would not only change Lenny's anger, it would change his father. 9:57. Lenny did not go to Samuel, not yet. He sat with the phone number written on a scrap, stared at it, then put it down. Fear had changed direction. Yesterday he feared Bumpy's answer. Today he feared his father's question. What had the old man known? What had he asked for? What had he agreed to? Lenny remembered the last prison visit. His father had looked exhausted, but calm. Too calm. Lenny had said, "I'll get out and fix this." His father answered, "Just get out." At the time, Lenny heard defeat. Now he heard priority. Get out, not win, not appeal, not avenge. Get out, alive. Lenny leaned back and closed his eyes. For 3 years, he thought his father died waiting for him to succeed. Maybe his father had died satisfied that his son was still breathing. That thought nearly broke him. 10 o'clock. He finally dialed Samuel Keene. The man answered on the second ring. "It's Briggs." "I know." "Where?" Samuel gave an address. Lenny wrote it down. "Now?" "If you want." Lenny looked at the clock. "Yeah." He hung up, put on his jacket, then stopped at the gloves. For no clear reason, he took them from the wall. Both. Placed them inside a canvas bag. He stared at the bag. Maybe habit, maybe instinct. Maybe the first movement towards something he refused to name. He left the apartment. Downstairs, sunlight cut through the hallway. Outside, Harlem moved normally. Lenny stepped into it, carrying old boxing gloves and new doubt. Yesterday, he had gone looking for Bumpy Johnson to punish the man who ruined his life. Today, he was going to meet someone who might prove that story wrong. A man can survive a beating. Surviving a new truth is harder. 10:03. Samuel waited in the back of a small insurance office. One desk, 2 filing cabinets, no customers. Lenny entered. Samuel looked at his bruised face. "You made noise." Lenny set the bag down. "People keep telling me." Samuel pointed to a chair. Lenny sat. "You knew my father?" "Not well." "Then start with what you know." Samuel nodded. 1953, your father came looking for Bumpy. Lenny's jaw tightened. "I know that part." "Good. He found me first." "Why?" "Because I knew how to reach the right people." Lenny leaned forward. "What did he say?" Samuel looked at him. "He said his son had robbed men who wouldn't stop at court." Lenny swallowed. "He knew?" "Yes." "What else?" Samuel paused. "He said he needed you taken off the street before they found you." Lenny froze. Not the whole truth, but close enough to see its outline. 10:06. "Taken off the street how?" Lenny asked. Samuel shook his head. "That's not my part." "You heard him." "I heard fear." "That's not an answer." "It's the only honest one." Lenny leaned back. Samuel continued. "Your father wasn't asking how to save your career." That sentence cut. "He was asking how to save your life." Lenny looked away. The office became too small. Samuel watched him quietly. "He said anything about prison?" "No." "About police?" "No." "About Bumpy?" "Only that he believed Bumpy could stop what was coming." Lenny looked back. "Why would he believe that?" Samuel shrugged. "Men know who to ask when fear becomes expensive." Lenny stared. His father had not gone to a doctor. Not first. Not that day. He had gone looking for a man with enough influence to interrupt death. That changed everything, but not yet completely. 10:09. Lenny stood. "Did Bumpy help him?" Samuel looked at him. "You already know you're alive." Lenny's face hardened. "Don't talk like him." Samuel smiled faintly. "Nobody talks like him. Some of us just learn to answer carefully." Lenny grabbed the canvas bag. "Anything else?" Samuel hesitated. "One thing." Lenny stopped. "Your father wasn't begging." Lenny looked back. Samuel continued. He was scared, sick, tired. A pause. But he was negotiating. That surprised Lenny. "Negotiating what?" Samuel shook his head. "Didn't hear." Lenny's eyes narrowed. "But you saw him after?" "Yes." "How'd he look?" Samuel thought. "Relieved." The word hit hardest. Not happy, not calm. Relieved. Relief means a danger has moved, not disappeared, moved. Lenny left without saying goodbye. He carried the bag differently now, closer. 10:12. Bumpy received Samuel's call. "He came." "I know." "He asked the right questions." "Good." Samuel hesitated. "I told him his father was relieved." Bumpy closed his eyes briefly. "That's fine." "You think he's ready?" "No." Samuel laughed softly. "You're hard on him." "I'm accurate." Bumpy looked at the folded note again. Ready was a dangerous word. Men are rarely ready for the truth that rearranges the dead. But there was a difference between not ready and unable. Lenny was getting closer. Bumpy placed the note inside an envelope. No name on the front. Just a date. 1953. Benny watched. Tomorrow? Bumpy nodded. The whole thing? The whole thing. Benny looked toward the window. Then tomorrow either fixes him or breaks him. Bumpy sealed the envelope. No. A pause. Tomorrow tells him what he has to fix himself. That was different and harder. A 10:15. Lenny walked toward the old Fulton gym. He had not planned to. His feet chose it. The building still stood. Same narrow entrance, same faded lettering. Inside, leather struck leather. A bell rang. That sound stopped him. For 3 years he had avoided it. Not because he hated boxing, because he loved it too much. He entered. Nobody recognized him immediately. Good. He stood near the wall. 2 young fighters moved in the ring. Jab, step, right hand, clinch, break, the trainer shouted. Hands come back. Lenny froze. Nate's old sentence. Hands come back. He looked down at his own, then at the canvas bag. Some things return because you earn them. Some return because someone kept them from being destroyed. Lenny finally understood why Bumpy gave that order. Not the whole reason, but enough. He left before anyone could ask his name. 10:18. Outside the gym, Lenny stood in sunlight. The city moved around him, cars, buses, shoes on pavement, a delivery man shouting. He opened the bag, looked at the old gloves, then closed it. No triumph, no decision, not yet, just possibility. Possibility had once been cheap, then prison made it priceless. Lenny looked toward downtown. Somewhere, Bumpy Johnson had the rest of the story, the part involving his father, the part everyone kept walking around. Tomorrow. Lenny hated the word less now, because tomorrow no longer meant waiting. It meant evidence, and for the first time in 3 years, he wanted evidence more than revenge. That was the real change. Not forgiveness, not gratitude. Those were distant things, but hatred had lost its monopoly. Once that happens, truth has room to enter. 10:21, Bumpy sat alone when Benny returned. Briggs went to the gym. Bumpy looked up. Inside? For a few minutes. Good. Benny smiled slightly. You expected that? No. Then why good? Bumpy folded his hands. Because a man doesn't carry gloves to a place he plans to bury them. Benny considered that. He's still angry? Of course. At you? Probably. At himself? Bumpy looked toward the sealed envelope. More than yesterday. Benny nodded. That could be dangerous. Self-hatred has fewer exits. Bumpy knew it too. He needs the third piece. Benny said it quietly. Bumpy answered, tomorrow. The word closed the room. Inside the envelope waited the part Lenny did not know. Not that his father understood the danger. Not that he sought help. Not that death had been closer than prison. The final piece was worse. His father had made a choice, and Bumpy had agreed to carry it out. 10:24 Lenny returned home before noon. He hung the gloves back on the wall, but differently. Not as relics, not yet as tools, somewhere between. He placed the documents beside his father's letters, then wrote 4 lines on a blank page. I robbed them. They came for me. My father knew. My father went to Bumpy. He stared. 4 facts. No interpretation. That was new. For years he had written conclusions first. Now he was learning sequence. Facts first, meaning later. Bumpy would approve of that. The thought annoyed him. Lenny almost tore the page. Didn't. He added 1 more line. I went to prison. Then another. I stayed alive. He stopped. The space between those 2 sentences was the entire story. Tomorrow, Bumpy Johnson would tell him what belonged there, and Lenny was no longer certain he wanted to hear it. That was exactly why he would. 8:07. Lenny Briggs woke before the alarm. No dream, no noise, just awake. His ribs hurt less. His questions hurt more. On the table, 6 lines remained where he had written them. I robbed them. They came for me. My father knew. My father went to Bumpy. I went to prison. I stayed alive. 6 facts. 1 missing bridge. Lenny stared at the last 2. Prison. Alive. For 3 years he had believed those words belonged on opposite sides of his life. One destroyed the other. Now they looked connected. That was harder to accept than hatred. Hatred is simple. It gives every wound an address. Understanding changes the address while the wound stays where it is. Lenny dressed, then took the boxing gloves from the wall. He held them, thought, and put them back. Today was not about boxing. Not yet. Wait 10 across Harlem. Bumpy Johnson opened the envelope. The paper inside had aged, creases white from folding, ink slightly faded, one corner bent. Cheap paper, expensive decision. Benny Hale stood across the room. You giving him that? After. After what? After he hears it. Benny nodded. Paper proves. A man's voice explains. Confuse the order and proof becomes an argument. Bumpy folded the letter along its old lines, placed it back inside. Where's Briggs? On his way. Alone? Yes. Bumpy looked toward the window. Good. No audience today. No club. No crowd. No slap waiting to become rumor. Some truth need witnesses. Others die when watched. Benny reached for his coat. You want me here? No. Arthur? No. Bumpy put the envelope on the table. This started with his father. A pause. It ends with his son. 8:13. Lenny walked slowly, not because of the ribs, because he had nowhere else to arrive first. The meeting was in the same upstairs room. Yesterday he had climbed those stairs angry. Today he climbed them careful. Anger enters rooms before the body. Doubt waits at the door. Arthur wasn't downstairs. That surprised him. Neither was Benny. Lenny reached the second floor. The door stood open. Bumpy sat alone. 1 table, 2 chairs, 1 envelope. Lenny noticed it immediately. Bumpy noticed him noticing. Close the door. Lenny did. No greeting, no handshake. They had moved beyond manners. Lenny sat without being told. Bumpy looked at his face, bruising, fading, swelling down. Ribs? Still there. Good. Lenny almost smiled. Didn't. He pointed toward the envelope. That mine? Bumpy answered. It was your father's. The room changed. 8:16. Lenny looked at the envelope. Didn't touch it. Where'd you get it? From him. When? 1953. Lenny swallowed. Bumpy kept one hand beside the envelope, not protecting it, controlling the sequence. Lenny leaned back. You said you'd tell me everything. I will. No pieces. No pieces. No tomorrow. Bumpy looked at him. No tomorrow. That settled something. Lenny nodded. Then start. Bumpy didn't begin with the letter. He began with Lenny. 4 robberies. Lenny exhaled. We did this. We did facts. Bumpy leaned forward. Today we do consequences. Lenny said nothing. Bumpy continued. First place lost money. A pause. Second place lost money and a man lost teeth. Another. Third place put 2 men in a hospital. Lenny's jaw tightened. Fourth place changed the conversation. Why? Because you stopped looking like thieves. Bumpy's eyes hardened. You started looking like a challenge. 8:19, Lenny frowned. We were kids. To yourselves. Bumpy shook his head. Not to them. Lenny looked away. Bumpy continued. You were 22, big, winning fights. People knew your face. I wasn't famous. Didn't need to be. A recognizable man repeatedly taking money from connected operations was not just losing his mind. He was creating a story. Stories create imitators. Imitators cost money. Money brings decisions. Bumpy tapped the table. After the fourth robbery, repayment wasn't enough. Lenny looked back. What did they want? Bumpy's answer came clean. You. Lenny stayed still. He had expected it. Expectation did not make it lighter. Dead? Yes. The word sat between them, no decoration. Death does not improve when dressed. Lenny's fingers moved against his knee. Who decided? Men above the men you hit. Luciano? Bumpy paused. The order moved through people tied to Luciano's network. Accurate, nothing more. 8:22. Lenny nodded slowly. So, Darnell, I told you. You don't know. Correct. Bumpy would not turn uncertainty into drama. Lenny respected that despite himself. What did they plan for me? Does it matter? Yes. Bumpy studied him, then answered. They were looking for your routines. Lenny's eyes narrowed. Gym? Yes. Apartment? Yes. My father? A pause. Eventually. Lenny went still. That word reached somewhere deeper. Bumpy continued. They didn't need to hurt him. They needed him to find you. Lenny looked toward the floor. His father. Sick. Coughing. Already weak. And men could have appeared at his door because of something Lenny had done. The realization entered slowly. Guilt is heavier when nobody places it on you. Lenny whispered. He knew they were looking. Not at first, but he found out. Yes. How? Bumpy looked at the envelope. That's where he enters. 8:25. Bumpy remembered the day. September. Rain earlier, heat afterward. Lenny's father had come without appointment. His name was Walter Briggs, 54, mechanic's hands, thin from illness. A cough he tried to hide inside a handkerchief. He waited downstairs nearly 40 minutes, wouldn't leave. Bumpy finally saw him. Walter entered with his hat in both hands, not begging, not yet. He said, My boy made a mistake. Bumpy answered, Your boy made 4. Walter accepted the correction. That mattered. Men asking favors usually begin by lying about the size of the problem. Walter didn't. He thinks he can fight his way through anything. Bumpy had looked at him. Can he? Walter almost smiled. In a ring. Then the smile disappeared. Not through this. Lenny listened without moving. For the first time in 3 years, his father's final months were becoming a scene he had never witnessed. 8:28, Lenny interrupted. He came alone? Yes. How sick was he? Bumpy thought. Sick enough, I noticed. Lenny lowered his eyes. Did he ask for money? No. That surprised him. Medicine? No. A doctor? No. Lenny stared. Bumpy continued. He asked what was going to happen to you. Lenny swallowed. What did you tell him? The truth. Which was? That the Italians weren't looking for repayment anymore. Silence. Walter had understood immediately. Bumpy remembered that. No theatrics, no disbelief, just a father hearing the price. Walter asked, Can you stop it? Bumpy had answered, Maybe. How much? Wasn't money. Walter looked confused. Bumpy explained. The men hunting Lenny needed one thing above everything else. Certainty. Certainty that he would stop. Certainty he wouldn't hit another operation. Certainty he wouldn't become an example other young men copied. Death provided certainty. Bumpy needed another method. 8:31, Lenny leaned forward. And that was prison. Bumpy looked at him, eventually. What came first? A conversation. With who? People who could carry a message downtown. Lenny's jaw tightened. What message? Bumpy answered. That Briggs would disappear from the street. For how long? Long enough. That's not a number. It didn't need to be. Bumpy had not negotiated years. He had negotiated outcome. Lenny off the street, his crew broken apart. The robberies finished. No public retaliation. No body for Harlem to answer. Lenny stared. And they accepted that? Not immediately. What changed? Bumpy paused. Your father. Lenny's eyes narrowed. What did he do? Nothing dramatic. Bumpy looked toward the old envelope. He agreed. To what? To letting you hate the people who put you away. Lenny stopped breathing for a second. There, the bridge was beginning to appear, and Lenny already hated its shape. 8:34, Bumpy continued. Police already had pieces. Not enough. No. Lenny knew that. His lawyer had said the same thing. Weak identification, contradicting witnesses, no weapon recovered. The case had changed suddenly. 2 witnesses appeared. Both connected indirectly to Bumpy's Harlem network. Their statements made the prosecution solid. Lenny looked at him. You gave them witnesses? Yes. The answer was immediate. Lenny's old anger flickered. Bumpy let it. You arranged it? Yes. You knew I'd go away? Yes. Lenny stood. Bumpy remained seated. My father knew? Yes. The anger stopped. Not disappeared. Stopped. Lenny stared. No. Bumpy said nothing. No. Lenny shook his head harder. He wouldn't do that. Bumpy looked at the envelope. He didn't want to. He wouldn't. Bumpy finally raised his eyes. He wanted a living son more than he wanted an innocent-looking decision. Lenny had no answer. The room went quiet. 8:37. Lenny walked toward the window, his back to Bumpy. He knew prison would kill my career. Yes. He knew I had fights. Yes. He knew what boxing meant. Yes. Lenny turned. Then why? Bumpy's expression hardened. Because careers can be restarted. A pause. Funerals can't. Lenny's face tightened. He looked away again. Bumpy did not soften the sentence. Softness would insult Walter's choice. He asked whether there was another way. Lenny turned back. There was? Not one I trusted. What? Move you. Where? Far. I would have gone. Bumpy shook his head. No. You don't know that. I knew you at 22. Lenny started to object. Bumpy cut him off. You robbed them 4 times. Silence. You would have come back. Lenny opened his mouth, closed it. Because somewhere beneath pride, he knew. At 22, he probably would have. 8:40. Bumpy stood. He walked toward the window beside Lenny, not close enough. Your father knew too. Lenny's eyes stayed outside. He said that? Almost exactly. What exactly? Bumpy remembered. Walter sitting across from him, hands shaking slightly. Not fear, illness. Bumpy had suggested sending Lenny away. Walter shook his head. He'll come back. How you know? Because he thinks leaving means losing. Walter coughed. Then, he needs a door he can't open. Lenny closed his eyes. That sounded like his father, not poetry, mechanics. A mechanic understands doors. What did you say? Bumpy answered. I told him prison was a hard door. Lenny opened his eyes. And him. He said hard was better than permanent. Silence. Lenny pressed his tongue against his swollen lip. His father had chosen between 2 injuries, one visible, one final, and chosen the one his son would hate him for. 8:43. What about his treatment? Lenny asked suddenly. There it was, the deepest wound. You knew he was sick. Yes. If I was outside, I could have fought. Maybe. I could have made money. Maybe. Not maybe. Lenny turned fully. I was winning. You were. I had promoters calling. Yes. I could have paid doctors. Bumpy let him finish. Lenny's voice rose. He died while I sat in a cell because of something you arranged. Yes. The answer shocked him. No defense, no escape. Bumpy continued. That part doesn't disappear because you learned something new. Lenny stared. You lost time. A pause. You lost fights. Another. You weren't beside your father when he died. Bumpy's voice remained steady. I won't insult you by pretending those things didn't cost you. Lenny's anger weakened because Bumpy wasn't trying to win. Truth is strongest when it admits its own damage. 8:46. But, Bumpy continued, you're arranging one fact wrong. Lenny waited. Your father didn't die because you couldn't box. Lenny's face hardened. You don't know that. I know what he told me. What? Bumpy walked back toward the table. He was already getting worse. I know. He knew what treatment cost. I know. He also knew what you thought. Lenny frowned. What I thought? That your hands could solve it? Lenny looked down at them. Bumpy continued. Your father didn't come to me asking how to keep you fighting so you could pay his bills. A pause. He came asking how to keep you breathing after he was gone. That sentence stayed. Lenny didn't move. The father's priority had not been treatment. It had been succession, not money for himself. Time for his son. Lenny sat slowly. His ribs no longer mattered. 8:49, Bumpy touched the envelope. He knew he might not have long. Lenny stared at it. He said that? Yes. What exactly? Bumpy looked at him. Walter's words had survived 3 years. Now they belonged to the son. He said, I'm already fighting something I may not beat. Don't let my boy fight something he can't. Lenny lowered his head. No tears. Not yet. Just breath. Slow. Uneven. Bumpy waited. Grief does not need commentary. Commentary is what people use when silence makes them uncomfortable. Bumpy was comfortable with silence. Lenny wasn't. Not anymore. He knew he'd die. He knew it was possible. And he still... Lenny couldn't finish. Bumpy did. He still chose your life over having you beside his bed. Lenny covered his mouth with one hand, the same hand Bumpy had ordered protected. Now it finally had another purpose. 8:52. For several minutes, neither man spoke. Traffic below, a truck changing gears, footsteps on stairs somewhere else in the building. Life, persistent. Lenny looked up eventually. Did he know I'd blame you? Bumpy nodded. Yes. And he was all right with that? No. Lenny frowned. He wasn't all right with any of it. Bumpy sat opposite him. That's what choices are sometimes. A pause. Not good against bad. Bad against permanent. Lenny looked toward the envelope. Why didn't you tell me? When? After I got out. You didn't come asking. I shouldn't have had to. Bumpy accepted that. Maybe. The answer surprised Lenny. Bumpy continued. But your father asked me for something else. What? Let you come home without inheriting the war. Lenny stared. If I told you immediately who wanted you dead, what would have you done? Lenny knew. Bumpy knew he knew. That was enough. 8:55. At 25, Lenny could lie about 22. He chose not to. I would have gone looking. For who? Anybody. Bumpy nodded. Exactly. Lenny rubbed his forehead. So everybody kept quiet. Enough people. And I thought you destroyed me. Yes. I hit Calvin. Yes. I slapped you. Bumpy touched his cheek lightly. Yes. Lenny looked embarrassed for the first time. Not afraid. Embarrassed. I'm supposed to apologize. Bumpy leaned back. I didn't ask. Why? Because apologies made under debt aren't worth much. Lenny looked at him. Bumpy continued. You thought you knew. You were wrong. You paid for the slap. Calvin still deserves something from you." Lenny nodded slowly. That distinction mattered. Bumpy's account was closed. Calvin's wasn't. Street morality was rarely clean. But it kept separate books. Lenny understood books better now. 858 Bumpy pushed the envelope across the table. Lenny did not touch it. "What's inside?" His words. "A letter to me?" "No." Lenny frowned. "To you?" "Partly." Bumpy tapped the envelope. He wrote down what he wanted because he didn't trust his health to give him another meeting. Lenny finally picked it up. His fingers trembled. The paper made almost no sound. Cheap paper, expensive ink. He opened it. Recognized the handwriting immediately. That nearly stopped him. His father. Not a memory. Not Bumpy's version. His father's hand. Lenny read. Slowly, the note was brief. Walter acknowledged his son's crimes, acknowledged the danger, asked Bumpy to accept whatever arrangement would keep Leonard alive. Then the final lines. Lenny read them twice. His breathing changed. Bumpy looked away. Some moments belong to the person receiving them. Power should know when to leave the room without moving. 9:01. Lenny read the final line again. His father had written, "If he hates me for choosing this, let him. Hate still needs a living man to carry it." Lenny placed the letter down. Carefully, no dramatic collapse, no shouting. Just a man sitting beside the ruins of a story he had lived inside for 3 years. His father had known. His father had chosen. Bumpy had executed the choice. Prison had taken 3 years, but death had been waiting to take all of them. The arithmetic was brutal because both sides were true. Lenny looked at Bumpy. "You could have refused him." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" Bumpy answered, "Because he was right." "About me?" "About what you'd do." Lenny almost smiled through the pain. "My old man knew me." "Better than you did." Lenny nodded. This time the sentence didn't insult him. 9:04. Lenny folded the letter. Same creases. Same lines his father had made. "You keep this?" "It's yours." Lenny looked up. "You sure?" "It was always yours." He placed it inside his jacket, close to the chest. For 3 years he had carried anger there. The pocket now had competition. "What happened to the men who wanted me dead?" Bumpy answered carefully. "Time happened." "Meaning?" "Organizations change. Men move. Priorities move. Some die." Lenny nodded. "And me. You did your sentence." "That's enough?" It became enough. Lenny looked at his hands. "So I'm clear?" Bumpy's expression sharpened. Don't confuse yesterday's settlement with tomorrow's permission. Lenny understood. No immunity, no magic. Just an old account closed. Bumpy stood. "The men you robbed don't own your future." A pause. "But neither do I." That mattered more than Lenny expected. 9:07. Lenny remained seated. "So that's it?" "That's the truth." "No speech?" Bumpy looked at him. "You need one?" Lenny shook his head. "No." "Good." Bumpy picked up his hat. Lenny watched. "What am I supposed to do now?" Bumpy stopped. There it was. The first question all week that wasn't about 1953. Not what happened. What now? Bumpy looked toward Lenny's hands. "That's your business." Lenny gave a bitter laugh. "Everybody keeps telling me I was good." "You were." "Was." Bumpy put on his hat. 25 isn't dead." Lenny looked up. Bumpy continued. "But talent gets old faster than men." The words landed. No promise yet. Just a clock. Lenny flexed his fingers unconsciously. Bumpy noticed. 3 years had been taken. The next 3 did not have to be. That difference was called choice. Choice is heavier than blame. 9:10. Bumpy walked toward the door. Lenny stood. "Mr. Johnson." Bumpy stopped. It was the first time Lenny had called him that. Not Bumpy, not Old King, not accusation, just a name with distance. Lenny struggled for words. Bumpy waited. My father... The sentence failed. He tried again. Thank you for telling me. Bumpy nodded. Nothing more. Lenny looked down. And yesterday. Bumpy's eyebrow moved slightly. I shouldn't have put my hand on you. There it was. Not elegant. Enough. Bumpy answered, You already paid for that. Lenny almost smiled. Yeah. He touched his ribs. I noticed. Bumpy opened the door, then stopped. One hand on the frame. He had one piece of business left, not Walter's, his own. If you still want to fight? Lenny's head rose. The room became still again. 9:13. Bumpy did not turn fully. I know people. Lenny stared. What people? People who train fighters. Real trainers? Bumpy looked back. I don't collect fake ones. Lenny's face changed. For the first time in the story, he looked 25. Not old from prison, not hard from grief, young. Possibility does that. Then suspicion returned. Why? Bumpy's answer came immediately. Because your father bought you time. A pause. What you do with it isn't his decision anymore. Lenny looked toward his hands. I haven't fought in 3 years. I know. I might be finished. Then they'll tell you. You think I'm not? Bumpy's expression remained neutral. I think 2 men beat you yesterday and both had to work for it. Lenny laughed. It hurt his ribs. This time he kept laughing. Small. Real. Bumpy waited until it stopped. Interested? Lenny nodded once. Yeah. 9:16. Bumpy reached inside his jacket, removed a card, a name, an address, no grand introduction, no contract, no promise of championships. He placed it on the table. Go Monday. Lenny picked it up. Who is he? Elias Ward. Trainer? Trainer who doesn't care what you used to be. Lenny studied the card. What do I tell him? Your name. That's it? If that's not enough, you're not ready. Lenny put the card beside his father's letter. 2 pieces of paper. One explained why the past had happened. The other offered no explanation at all. Only an address. The future is usually less detailed than the past. That's why people fear it. Lenny looked at Bumpy. What do you want from me? Nothing. That answer confused him more than any other. No favors? No. No work? No. Then why give me this? Bumpy opened the door. Second chances shouldn't come with chains. 9:19. Lenny followed him into the hallway. Bumpy descended the stairs. Lenny stayed above. Mr. Johnson? Bumpy looked up. What if I blow it? Bumpy considered him. Then you blow it. Lenny frowned. That's all? You're 25. A pause. Nobody can keep saving you from yourself. The words were not cruel. That made them useful. Bumpy continued down. Lenny stood with one hand on the railing, his father's letter inside his jacket, trainer's card in his pocket, bruises beneath his shirt. Nothing had been erased. His father was still dead. The 3 years were still gone. The missed fights would never return. Truth does not refund pain. It only tells you who actually charged the price. Lenny went back into the room, sat, and read his father's letter one more time, this time without looking for somebody to blame. 9:22. Benny waited outside beside the car. Bumpy approached. Done? Done. He take it? The letter. The truth. Bumpy opened the rear door. Ask him in 6 months. Benny smiled slightly. That long? Understanding is slower than pain. Bumpy entered. Benny got behind the wheel. Before pulling away, he asked, You give him Ward? Yes. Good trainer. That's why. You think Briggs can come back? Bumpy looked through the window. Not my question. What is? whether he shows up Monday. The car moved. Harlem passed around them. Bumpy didn't look back at the building. He had fulfilled Walter Briggs's request 3 years earlier. Today he had fulfilled the part Walter never asked for. He gave the son the truth. Truth isn't rescue. It is the point where rescue ends. After that, a man walks alone. 9:25 Monday came. Lenny stood outside Elias Ward's gym at 6:48 in the morning. The card said 7. He was early. He almost left 3 times. At 6:59, the door opened. Elias Ward looked him over. 50, compact, gray sweatshirt, face unimpressed by almost everything. Briggs? Yeah. You're late. Lenny looked at the clock. It's 6:59. Elias stepped aside. Then you wasted 11 seconds arguing. Lenny stared. Elias walked inside. Coming? Lenny entered. The gym smelled exactly right. Leather, sweat, dust, rosin. 3 years disappeared for half a second, then returned. Elias pointed toward a locker. Change. You want to see me hit? No. Lenny frowned. What then? Want to see if you can listen. The sentence almost made him laugh. Bumpy had chosen the trainer carefully. Of course he had. Lenny changed. 9:28. The first week contained no sparring. Lenny hated it. Footwork, rope, bag, defense, conditioning, again. Elias watched everything. You're strong. Lenny kept moving. I know. That's your problem. Lenny stopped. Elias pointed. Again. Lenny moved. Old instincts returned badly at first, then cleaner. His lungs burned. His ribs healed. His timing returned slower than his pride wanted. Every evening he thought about quitting. Every morning he arrived. Time isn't numbers, it's alignment. For years Lenny had measured time by what was taken. 3 years, 1 career, 1 father. Now he began measuring differently. Rounds, miles, jabs, days without missing training. The arithmetic changed because the man doing it changed. Bumpy never visited, never called, never asked Elias for reports. A second chance watched too closely becomes another kind of ownership. Bumpy had promised a door, not supervision. 9:31. 3 months passed. Lenny sparred 6 rounds, then 8, then 10. He lost weight, not strength. Anger left his punches first. That surprised Elias. You trying to hurt the bag? No. Good. Bag never robbed you. Lenny smiled. He had learned to smile again. Not often. Enough. One afternoon, Calvin Morrow entered the gym. Lenny saw him in the mirror. Stopped. Calvin's lip had healed months earlier. The 2 men stood 10 feet apart. No Bumpy, no Arthur, no crowd. Lenny removed his gloves, walked over. Calvin waited. Lenny spoke first. I was wrong to put you in it. Calvin looked at him. Yeah. I was angry. Also yeah. Lenny nodded. I'm sorry. Calvin studied him, then looked toward the ring. You any good? Lenny almost laughed. Working on it. Calvin nodded. Then work. He left. The account closed quietly. Most important ones do. 9:34. By month 5, Elias made a telephone call. Not to Bumpy, to a promoter. That mattered. Lenny had earned the call himself. A small fight. 8 rounds. No headline, no special treatment. Opponent with a winning record. Lenny accepted before Elias finished explaining. Elias hung up. You didn't ask money. Lenny shrugged. How much? Elias smiled. Now you ask? The purse wasn't large. Lenny didn't care. He went home that evening and took his father's letter from the drawer, read it, then placed it beside the fight contract. 2 papers again. Past. Future. This time they did not fight each other. Lenny touched the photograph beside his bed. You were right. He paused. Then, don't get used to it. The room stayed silent, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt settled. There is a difference. Lenny turned off the light. The fight was 4 weeks away. 9:37. 6 months after the night of the Blue Lantern, Bumpy rode through Harlem in the back of a sedan. Different morning, same city. Benny drove. Traffic moved slowly along Lenox. Bumpy read a newspaper. Not sports, business. At the corner, the car stopped behind a delivery truck. Benny tapped the wheel. Bumpy looked up. Across the street, workers had pasted new posters onto a brick wall. Music, a dance, political meeting, then boxing. Bumpy's eyes stopped. Large letters, a fight card, several names, one near the center. Lenny Briggs, 8 rounds. Saturday night, St. Nicholas Arena. Bumpy looked at it. No smile, no visible satisfaction, just recognition. 6 months earlier, those hands had slapped him, then survived punishment. Now somebody had printed them a future. Paper is colder than steel. Sometimes it is kinder too. 9:40. Benny noticed where Bumpy was looking. He leaned slightly toward the windshield, then saw the name. Well, Bumpy said nothing. Benny smiled. Kid made it. Made a poster. That's something. Yes. The traffic ahead began moving. Benny kept his foot on the brake for another second. You want to stop? Bumpy looked at the poster. A worker brushed paste over one corner. Lenny Briggs. The name had returned to a fight bill. Not because Bumpy ordered it. Not because Walter Briggs could see it. Because Lenny had shown up Monday, then Tuesday, then every day after. That was the part nobody could arrange for him. Benny waited. Stop? Bumpy looked forward. No. Benny released the brake. The car moved. The poster slid past the window, then disappeared behind them. 9:43. Benny glanced into the mirror. You going to the fight? Bumpy opened his newspaper again. No. Why not? Bumpy turned a page. He doesn't need me there. Benny nodded. That made sense. A favor that demands an audience is not a favor. It is an investment. Walter Briggs had asked Bumpy to save his son's life. Bumpy had done that. 3 years later, Lenny had demanded an explanation with his hand. Bumpy had answered the hand first, then the question. Now the rest belonged to the boxer. The car crossed another intersection. Harlem moved. A boy on the sidewalk shadow boxed against his reflection in a store window. Jab. Right. Left hook. Hands coming back. Bumpy watched for 1 second, then returned to the newspaper. Some men rule by keeping people close. Others know when to let them go. 9:46. Behind them, the poster remained on the wall. People passed it. Most didn't stop. A few read the names. One old man pointed. Briggs. His friend looked. That kid used to fight years ago. Guess he's back. That was all. No one mentioned prison. No one mentioned Luciano's people. No one mentioned Walter Briggs climbing stairs while sick. No one mentioned witnesses. No one mentioned the Blue Lantern. No one mentioned the slap. The city had already moved on. Cities are good at that. People are slower. Lenny Briggs had spent 3 years believing Bumpy Johnson stole his future. The truth was uglier. Bumpy had helped take 3 years from him. His father had asked him to, because other men intended to take every year that remained. Prison had been a cage, but sometimes a cage is also a wall. It depends which side the wolves are on. 9:49. That Saturday, the bell rang. Lenny stood in his corner. Lights above him. Crowd beyond the ropes. Elias Ward leaned close. No proving anything. Lenny nodded. Understand? Yeah. You're here to box. Another nod. Across the ring, his opponent bounced on his feet. Young, hungry, strong. Lenny looked toward the crowd once. No Bumpy. He hadn't expected him. Still he looked, then stopped. This was not Bumpy's fight, not Walter's, not Luciano's, not Prison's. His. The referee called them forward. Instructions. Touch gloves. Back to corners. Lenny rolled his shoulders. His hands rose. 3 years ago, he believed strength meant nobody could force him backward. Now he knew better. Strength was knowing when backward was the only direction that kept you alive long enough to move forward again. The bell rang. Lenny stepped out, hands high. 9:52 Bumpy's car crossed Harlem at the same hour. He did not ask for the fight result. Not yet. The city would tell him eventually. Cities always do. Benny drove. Bumpy watched streetlights change. Red, green, movement, stop, movement again. That was the whole lesson. Lenny had mistaken a stop for an ending. Walter Briggs had understood the difference. So had Bumpy. A red light does not destroy the road. It keeps two directions from killing each other at the intersection. 3 years behind bars had been brutal. Unfair in ways, necessary in others. Nothing made Walter's death easier. Nothing returned the lost fights. Truth did not repair history. It aligned it. And sometimes alignment is the only justice time allows. Bumpy looked through the window. Harlem continued. So did Leonard Briggs. For now, that was enough.